Whoa. Hey there, friends and fans of tall, mysterious buildings in Westeros, like the High Tower, like the Wall, Storm's End, Nightfort, First Keep. Are these places set with spells? Michael talks about stuff because I think they are. Wait, am I talking to? What's going on here? I had to cut the music short. Hey, Michael, what's up there, buddy? I'll figure out how to do that transition smoothly at some point, but there we go.
It's all right. Good to be here.
It's mostly just to give the people waiting. Oh, sorry. I was just saying, the people waiting for the stream, sometimes it starts like 30 seconds late. By doing a little music intro, we give everybody a chance to sort of get up. But yes, thank you for joining me of the YouTube channel, Michael Talks About Stuff. And you are Michael, a.k.a. Benjen.
Yep. I think I might have like a second or two delay just from looking at the stream here just over the last second. So if that happens, it should clear itself up, I would imagine, pretty quickly.
It actually looks perfect to me. And yeah, if anybody's getting that, then it will shortly catch up. But yeah, I think it has already reconciled. And so, yes, welcome. If you didn't know, Michael Talks About Stuff, very cool YouTube channel. I will call you a new channel, but keep in mind I've been doing this for 10 years, 10 long waiting for Dance Dragons, so it's a little different perspective. But of course, many of my people know your channel already. But in case you're watching this and you do not know, Michael Talks About Stuff is one of the most creative theorists out there. He thinks about the story in a way which I resonate with, and I think most of you guys watching my videos will resonate with, but has reapproached a lot of the key mysteries of the story in a fresh way, Michael, and you've come up with a lot of interesting theories that sometimes they remind me of things I've thought about, but going down different directions, and some of them are just complete, like, never thought of that before, like you got me with the Marwyn, the Weirwood leaf chewing, before they brewed the tea on House of the Dragon. So this is going to be a really fun stream. If I could just give you guys an idea what we're going to do. We are these lore summits. We're going to be doing more of these in the future with other theorists. And basically the idea is to compare theories and notes and stuff, but to also to reapproach the key mysteries of the story kind of fresh. I was talking to Michael before the show and saying, you know, all of us with a lot of theories, we get stuck in our own headcanon of what we think is going to happen. And, you know, I think Azor Ahai invaded the Weirwood net, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, after a while, it just becomes canonized. And it's not canon. These are theories. And so by having someone like you on with a creative perspective that is similar but different, sometimes overlapping, sometimes completely different, I feel like it'll help me and all of us think about these things from a fresh point of view. And it's just going to be a lot of fun because theories are fun. So this is the Weirwood system. A lot of your theories center around the Weirwood system. And so what I'd like to do at the beginning is talk about what we each think the Weirwood system is. And then I want to get into a couple of your core theories about it. And then basically, guys, I've got a whole outline here. And we're going to go topic by topic. Oh, you've added some stuff. So we're going to talk about the various aspects of the trees and the Weirwood net and their connections to the others and what's happened to them and what all the blood sacrifice is going to. That's kind of the question of the stream. All this blood. We know it's powerful stuff. Everyone's feeding it to the trees. People are giving babies to the White Walkers. Where's all this magic going? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And yeah, Michael, what is the Weirwood system?
Am I going first on that one?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
All right. So I would say that the Weirwoods seem to be the magical conduit or power source for the old gods' magic, and it appears to be a giant system of trees that are interconnected magically and possibly physically, with their roots running deep enough below the earth to possibly all link up. The Weirwoods have people that are linked up to them, which we see down in Bloodraven's Cave, and they've had people linked up to them for thousands of years, it would seem, at this point. And these people who are linked to the trees seem to give these trees like a voice into the world, as well as possibly some other useful body parts, which I believe they may use to cast shadows in the same way that Stannis does with Melisandre. and we'll get into why later on in the stream, but I think that there's a good chance that these shadows are what the others actually are, is Weirwood shadows. So the trees have sap that are described as looking like blood, but in later books, it's described by characters seeing it up close as just actually being frozen blood. And the trees take in blood sacrifice, and so it seems like moving blood around as their sap is possibly a way that they can use this blood to maintain these bodies, as well as potentially use it for other blood magic, like we talked about, being a conduit for the old gods. So then I think that this system of magical power over the course of thousands of years, by offering power to people in Westeros who worship and sacrifice to the Weirwoods, is essentially wormed its way into forming a giant magical system that's interwoven with the social and political systems in Westeros, the morals and the legal systems even. And it's essentially made it a place that's not very great to live for people, but it does feed a lot of blood to the Weirwoods and lead to a lot of sacrifice to the old gods. So that's basically what I think the Weirwood system is.
There are some injustices and atrocities, but on the flip side, the old gods do drink a lot of blood.
Well, but how cool is it that your leader can, go into his puppy dog's mind? Isn't that worth the thousands of years of baby sacrifice?
Possibly so. The story would be a little flat without any of that stuff. So
Exactly. They make for a very interesting book for a fantasy, very interesting world for a fantasy book to be set in. I think George has outdone himself with this whole system.
Yeah, and so again, I want to with the whole fresh. Then first of all, good job. That was very interesting. There's a couple of things in there that raised an eyebrow. They were interesting.
Yeah.
But with the whole fresh approach thing, like you said, the Weirwoods and the others are the first two magical things in the story for a long time. Dany doesn't hatch the dragon's eggs until the end of A Game of Thrones. And obviously, the others in the prologue, the dragons at the end of the story, makes a nice bookend. But from the beginning of the story, as far as like, all right, I'm picking up this Game of Thrones book. What's it all about? How much fantasy is going to be in here? That was me in 2010 when the news first broke that HBO was going to make it into a TV show. This is my Game of Thrones origin story. Yeah. I was in the bookstore looking for a new fantasy series and had never read him. I'd always seen Martin's books but never tried them. And I saw the little gold sticker on it. It was like, soon to be an HBO. I was like, oh, well, I better read it to see what they screw up so I'll know what they get wrong, And the rest is history. And here we are. And I'm doing that for a career. Little did I know. But the point is...
For a few years, they screwed up nothing, and then they started to screw up lots of things.
Started to go off the rails, and then by the end... So, where were we? Yes, when you open the book and you don't know what kind of series you're going to get, you get these ice demons at the beginning. Okay, this is cool. That's definitely high fantasy and creepy and, And then you get the Weirwood tree. And the Weirwood tree is not really doing anything, but it's weird as hell. And it's just sitting there with this big bleeding face. And as I always like to point out, in the Godswood, when Ned and Cat are talking, Ned mentions the others, and Cat, I'm sorry, she's the one who mentions the others, but she glances over her shoulder, looks at the Weirwood tree, and she's like, there are darker things beyond the wall. And it's like, so it's just this creepy building thing about what are these weird bleeding trees? Like, they don't look happy. They've got terrifying faces. Bran is scared of it.
Yep. And I've got that quote. That's one of the quotes I added a little farther down. Is I think it's probably the bottom of the "they look scary" one. Yeah, there. He raced across the Godswood, taking the long way around to avoid the pool where the heart tree grew. The heart tree had always frightened him. Trees ought not have eyes, Bran thought, or leaves that look like human hands. And then I just included the rest of it just to show that Bran climbs up a sentinel tree when he goes on his last climb.
Bran is right. Trees probably shouldn't look like that. And so it's kind of, they're weird woods. They sure are, Ante. That's right. And so it's meant, when you have the character comment on it, it's kind of like putting a lampshade. It's like, hey, what are these weird trees? So
hold on to that for later, And then 5 books later, Ash is like, hey, wait, that sap's not sap that's actually blood. And then, yeah.
So here is my encapsulation. And what I challenged Michael to do, basically, I was like, give me 2-paragraph word scramble of like what's going on here. So that was the instruction. And I would call them a psychically linked and often physically linked, possibly all the way down to the, we'll talk about that, network of organisms, which appear to be trees, that seem to be fueled by blood sacrifice. This network of I can't believe it's not tree has some sort of consciousness or perception which exists outside the confines of time and which certain humans can tap into by eating their friends' brains scrambled up into a little wooden bowl, but only if their friends were psychic to begin with. Very important caveat. I believe all of the magic powers and practices currently associated with these trees exists in a fallen state, and that the entire network, save for the trees protected by the magic of the green men on the Isle of Faces, apparently, was magically transformed and corrupted at the time of the Long Night. The whole Weirwood network. It exists in a fallen state. That's why it looks like that. I believe some sort of healing or restoration of the Weirwoods, Michael, is the only way to resolve the issue of the White Walkers, who are the original tree spirits driven out by this defilement, in some sense. And who, let's see, yeah. This is what Bran's destiny as a Weirwood king will be, to cleanse the Weirwood net, and that will be accomplished by removing the human consciousness from the tree network so the others can go back inside. I also think there's a kind of bifurcation inside of the Weirwood net, and we'll talk about how these two ideas are kind of conflicting but not. Are the others kicked out of the Weirwood net, or is the Weirwood net bifurcated? They're in a dead half of it, and it mirrors the way that Westeros is cut in half by the wall, and the others live north of the wall in the cold dead lands. So haunted forest, etc., etc. We'll talk about this. And so I believe the others do still have the ability to access Weirwood magic, to receive power from blood sacrifices made to at least certain Weirwoods, and to eventually confront, the others have the power to confront greenseers like Bran and Bloodraven inside the astral plane, not unlike we saw on the show. I think the show got that right. So that is my nonsense psychobabble, what the hell are these things, explanation.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good, reasonable explanation. So we'll get into where
thanks
we
for coming, guys.
And,
make sure to subscribe to Michael Talks About Stuff. Problem solved.
We figured out what the trees are.
It's are they living on a planet with trees, or is it like trees with some dirt stuck to it?
Yeah, that is the question, right? Like how deep, like do the roots just all connect, and then are all of the different trees on the different continents linking into different root networks? Like, who knows?
Here, Sean is in the chat, quoting me. Only the dead part of the Weirwood net is alive. That's exactly right, Sean. It's confusing. It's something like that. All that's half dead, half alive. Are the others alive? Are they dead? There's a lot of in between stuff going on. So, Michael, I think your biggest theory, or the one that made the biggest splash, maybe, is your construction of the wall theory. But I wanted to basically give the opportunity, because everyone on my channel is familiar with my theories, to give the quick version of a couple of your main Weirwood theories, so that as we talk, you don't have to try to explain it right in the middle of the bullet points. So,
so I don't know if I mentioned this in my little thing at the beginning here, but I personally think that, for reasons we'll get into, this heart tree like system is probably the heart of the wall and might be the thing that actually builds the wall itself. I think that there is magic that can like form a ward in between two Weirwoods, and George puts this on display for us in Bloodraven's cave entrance. And so I think that if the wall was a line of Weirwoods, it would have the similar magical ward, which is exactly what we see it having. And I think that when Bran is at the Nightfort with the Black Gate and that giant organism there and the well, it seems like it's a big Weirwood to me, and we'll talk about that in more detail when we get to the Nightfort part. So yeah, basically the idea is that these trees, which trees take water from their roots and pump water up through themselves, they're taking the water that's down underground in Westeros and very specifically at the bottom of the tree at the Nightfort, and they're pumping it up and excreting it to build the wall. And so I think that the wall itself is built by this Weirwood system.
So you
And
and just to I'm occasionally I'll put my finger up like this if I
yeah,
want to
sorry,
pause it.
I had it blocked by the thing I was reading off of, and then I saw the tip of your finger.
So you started in the video. You started with the mystery of like why hasn't the wall melted away? Like why is it still there? It's not enough to like add a little bit of ice at the top or whatever. Like, and so you're saying it needs potentially it could have or might be better explained if it had a mechanism. And so you're saying the trees inside the wall pumping the water up and building the wall from the inside.
Exactly. That is, it's, I call it the Walter cycle. It's the water cycle that makes the wall keep going. And it's powered by this Weirwood system. And I think it's probably, as we'll talk about later, one of the main keys to what this Weirwood system is actually doing. Like how it maintains control by being responsible for the wall that keeps the others away. That's some pretty good incentive for people to continue worshiping these trees and feeding them their power source, because if you don't feed them their power source, the wall's magic goes away, then the demons come back. So it works well for them.
And let me just say that I think the first level of the idea, which is that there are probably more Weirwoods under the wall, and that the wall was built along some sort of line of Weirwoods, is really solid. And a lot of people have come to some version of that. Wiz the Smith has a really good ancient. I call it ancient. It's as old as my original essays, called The Hollow Hills. The hills are hollow. And basically, when you're talking about wards and Weirwoods, we know that like Storm's End is also warded. Bloodraven's Cave, like you said, probably the Winterfell crypts. And what do we know about all these castles are built around Weirwoods, which we're going to talk about. Yeah. So it is very logical to intuit that some part of or all of the magic for these wards is tied to or powered by the Weirwoods. We always see the wards around the Weirwoods. So either the Weirwoods are the things we are trying to protect, and or they are the things powering the ward. So I think that's all super solid. The trees building the wall from the inside is just kind of like a so I just
yeah, it's well, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, more. But there's when we see this thing that might be this giant tree, 2 times it's inexplicably wet, and George draws very specific note to the fact that it's wet by ending the chapter on the fact that Bran bumps his head on the Black Gate and water comes out of it and drips down his face. Like George draws extra attention to that. Why else would there be water flowing through this tree? Well, if the tree is a giant pump, pumping the water up from underground into the wall itself, that would make sense. And if you had to have a magical natural water pump, a tree is a pretty logical thing to use. So. Yeah. If you had anything else, otherwise I can move on to the other couple theories that I think kind of.
Oh yeah, well I thought your people strapped to Weirwoods under the wall thing is connected to the Walter cycle. So carry on.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So yeah, and the other thing that I think is at least pretty good chance of being the case is that there are bodies strapped to the trees inside the wall in the same way that there are bodies strapped to the Weirwood trees in Bloodraven's Cave. They could be very, very ancient people at this point, but I actually think that the wall was very possibly built to preserve these bodies and their immortality. Because if you're strapped to this tree and this tree can give you immortality, which we'll get into later, how being strapped up to these trees seems to sustain your body. Well, like I talked about, if the others are shadows from these bodies that are strapped up inside the wall, they're cast out there. The wall is built as like an ice, like if you want to preserve a body, you can also put it on ice. So you have like the magical life preservation method of George's world, which is these Weirwoods, and also the bodies are frozen in ice, which is like the sci-fi life preservation method. And then if these bodies are casting the others, as we just talked about, if the thing that's their giant life preserver is the wall, well, if that magic starts to fade, the others come back and feed a bunch of blood to those trees real quick, and people start worshiping the old ways again. So if you were strapped to these trees, you've built a perfect system to keep yourself alive forever. And I think that that's like it opens up some very interesting theories for what the others could want if they're from these bodies that are inside the wall or just strapped to the Weirwood somewhere.
So there's a bunch of interesting stuff that you said here. So first, I almost feel like I need to write notes down while you're talking. So the first thing is when Martin shows us a piece of magic, we should always take that piece and think about where else it could apply. So we've seen in Bloodraven's Cave, there's a bunch of old Children of the Forest greenseers that are barely physically present. They're just a little bit. They sort of follow Bran's eyes, and they're making fish mouth, but they can't really quite talk. They, and Bloodraven, we've seen. He's present for a little bit, and he's like, "Oh, I'm tired. I need to go back to the trees. The trees are calling. I'll see ya." So he's in between, and these other singers are more far gone. So we should wonder and speculate that there are more of those singers in other places, under Winterfell, maybe under all of the heart trees in the Godswoods, maybe under the entire wall. Because if that's what the children greenseers do, is they just stay in a root nest and gradually maybe petrify or whatever. No one's taking them out. They're going to be wherever they were. So whatever greenseers have been using trees at Storm's End or Winterfell in ancient day should still be down there. Actually.
And they're a very important part of this Weirwood system that we're talking about, and they're one of the ignored parts, I think, by a lot of the theorists. Like, they're probably going to be important is kind of how I feel. It's like there are so many little things that we just get a glimpse of in Bran 3: A Dance with Dragons that I think will be incredibly important in the last two books that people haven't quite grasped how important they are yet, because we got like 2 sentences on them. And
what's the bat skeleton?
The bat skeleton?
Mm-hmm. In Bloodraven's Cave.
Is there one down by the Weirwood? A big bat?
Is. People are like, it's a dragon. It's not a bat. It's a dragon.
That would be interesting. I mean, I don't...
It's probably just a bat, but I was just teasing you because you're like, everything is important. I was like, what about the bat? Okay. But no, for real. You're not wrong. And I have ignored it. I've only thought about greenseers in the thrones really in connection to Winterfell, because I think that's what the crypts are showing us, that the lowest levels of the crypts will be Weirwood thrones that have essentially petrified and turned to stone because they're 8,000 years old, and that later this just became a tradition of stone thrones and Stark kings with direwolves, because not all of them are greenseers. A lot of them are maybe just, ward kings. But yes, the lowest levels, there's got to be some petrified greenseers down there. But now that you point this out, you're right. They should be under every heart tree that's ever been used by a greenseer.
Yeah, and so if you want to talk about a greenseer who is, in my opinion, the best candidate to be petrified either under Winterfell or under the Wall, it's the guy who built both of those places. Bran the Builder, in theory, might still be alive. Like, this is one of the things that is not talked about at all, but, like, is logically set up based on those bodies still living. Like, Bran the Builder, in at least husk form, could still be alive under Winterfell or under the Wall. And if he's the one who set up this entire system, that might make him someone that they have to interact with at some point, in some fashion or another.
So I like the theory, and I forgot to even put this in here, but Night's Queen could be the one in the Winterfell crypts, because the one animated statue that we see down there is Lyanna's statue in Ned's dream, and it's weeping blood like a Weirwood, and Lyanna is a Night's Queen parallel figure. So some of us have wondered if maybe the Night's Queen is down there, or maybe at Nightfort, a parallel location or something like that. But yeah, Bran the Builder could be somewhere. And then getting back to your theory, the others.
Yes.
The others, so the mystery of the Wall, there's always like, why is it built? Why is it built out of ice? To keep out the ice demons. The logical people for who built the Wall magically out of ice is people that can control ice magic. The only people we've ever seen that can do that are the others. So you're either left with Bran the Builder was an ice wizard, which I've gone down that road, and I think I can put together a decent case for it, but it's highly speculative. It's based on the nicknames of, Edric Snowbeard and Jon Ice Eyes, and mostly the fact that we just need somebody that's on Team Living that can work with ice magic. And why shouldn't there be? If Melisandre can work with fire magic, why shouldn't somebody work with ice magic? But what you are proposing is that the others built it as a means of gaining immortality. So in my parlance, this is like Azor Ahai breaking into the Weirwood net. He's on the frozen side, and like his children with Night's Queen are the others. So basically, he's creating these tree shadows and building the wall potentially in order to do it.
Yeah, essentially, at some point in ancient history, there was like before the corruption, if we want to talk like pre and post corruption, before the corruption, there was these magical trees that were used to do something, right? They may have been used for blood magic things even before then. We don't really know. But at some point, to get the system that is set up now, it seems like some very powerful humans allied with the remaining children of the forest potentially built this system that preserved them and gave them immortality, which also guaranteed the worship of the Weirwoods forever and essentially just created a system to forever guarantee blood sacrifice to the children's religion. And now we're 10,000 years later, and we're dealing with the results of them having done that. And everyone forgot now that they've done that. So no one knows why the system is the way it is. It's just all set up for that. But there's a power grab by these ancient people potentially that gave us everything we have now.
So I see a couple good questions in the super chats there, which I will get in a second. And first, I want to talk about the idea, or continue talking about this idea of the others building the wall. I said to you on the phone that the others seem like they are children of the wall, or they are pieces of the wall. And what I mean by that is that the wall is a symbol of a moon, is a symbol of the ice moon. It is compared to the moon many times. It functions the same way, up in the sky, glittering, etc., etc. And basically, the others are moon children, just like the dragons are. The dragons are compared to meteors, which come from the moon. The others have shooting stars in their eyes, and they're made of ice. And that's literally what the comets are made out of, is ice. So they are like star children. And of course, their real mother is Night's Queen, whose skin is as pale as the moon. So you have this whole thing where the others come from the moon, just like the dragons do. They're both symbolic moon. I'm talking symbolism here.
Yeah.
They don't really come from the moon. They might come from...
They're a shadow. They're described as a trick of the moonlight the first time they're described.
And their swords are alive with moonlight.
Emerge.
So the whole moon energy is all about them, exactly.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you just look at the symbolism, I've kind of remarked, I was like, they seem like pieces of the wall chipped off and walking around, just like the moon meteors are chipped off pieces of the moon. And so what you're saying is kind of, like the wall is the real source of the others would be greenseers, potentially green men, strapped to weirwood thrones, maybe the trunk or the roots, something, but tied up, rigged up to the weirwoods, and then essentially their spirits are roaming free as the others, while the wall keeps them on ice.
Exactly, yeah.
So what I wanted to say basically is that I always talk about Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net and driving out the spirits of the original green men, who are then out in the cold, and they are spirits without bodies. Those are the others. They have some means of temporarily gaining an ice body, but they don't break the snow, and they can turn into mist, it seems like. So they're only partially substantial. And basically, there's a different way to say that's closer to what your theory is, which is that Night's Queen is dealing with an invasion of the Weirwood net by Azor Ahai and sort of turning the tables on him. We see this pattern a lot. And so Azor Ahai is this fiery dragon man. Think of Waymar, think of Waymar in the prologue invading the woods, just driving headlong into the woods, heedless, no fear, a man who knows no fear. And what happens? The others come out to deal with him, to deal with his transgression. And so Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net, Night's Queen takes his seed and soul, okay, and then gives birth to the others, who then are essentially fighting against Azor Ahai's former allies, the dragon people from the Great Empire of the Dawn, or whoever, that the Night's Watch, etc., etc. So that is closer to the show, also, where the children of the forest make the others as a weapon against the first men.
Yeah.
So in my version of that, it's Night's Queen making the others as a defense of the Weirwoods after their sort of invasion. And that's closer to kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say that I think if I were going to marry the two ideas, how I would say it probably would work is that essentially if you view it as the invasion of the Weirwood net to use these magical natural trees to sustain yourself and give yourself immortality, which I would say qualifies as an invasion of nature, to try and break nature to sustain yourself forever, especially when you have to sustain yourself off of human sacrifice of other people forever. So that's the corruption, and I think that Night's Queen may have been helping in that corruption if she is essentially taking the person who is strapped up to the trees and birthing shadow babies with them, which are the others, which the shadow baby Mel births is essentially made of smoke in the same way that you talked about how the others seem to be made of mist. So it makes sense that it's the icy version of the same thing Mel is doing. So you can imagine the Night's Queen doing the same thing with these bodies strapped up to the Weirwoods. She births them, and essentially, yeah, it's, as I said, building the system. So I would say she's not turning it against him necessarily. I think she was probably helping him with his corruption if that's how we're looking at it.
That could be also
his shadow babies. And one thing I noticed or thought of as you were saying that is like a lot of this is George's response to like different forms of immortality, right? And like being mortal versus immortal, like we see it in the House of the Undying. And if there are these bodies strapped up to the Weirwoods, it's dealing with the same sort of thing. And I was just thinking about like one of the ways people try to essentially become immortal is by having children. Like your children will carry on your lineage, and there you are in a way immortal.
The sorcerers in Ice and Fire often sacrifice their own children or their fertility to gain immortality, though, don't they?
Yes. And George views the birth of life as something that has magical power in this world. Like giving birth, conceiving life is a magical spell. Sacrificing life gives magical power. So he definitely views it that way. And like I was just thinking of like, okay, so is this his sort of commentary on like, oh, these are the ways people try to gain immortality, and one of them is having children. So in the scheme for these people to strap themselves up to trees and become immortal forever, having these magical shadow children who enforce their will upon everyone forever is kind of like incorporating that into it.
It's perfect thematically because it's like you're having a child, but it's not a child. It's just another vessel for you to inhabit, kind of like the Bolton theory.
That's what
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the quest for immortality through your children is sort of like that similar, like, I think George could be making a comment on that being like a similar, like, it's not really what you think it is. Okay.
So the core idea, which I like here, is the idea that the others are, and like I said yesterday, I wish I had thought of this, that the others are the shadow babies of the Weirwoods. Because they're called the White Walkers of the Wood. I called them tree shadows and all kinds of things like that. I was right there. I was so close.
You were. That was one I watched. I was watching your video and I was waiting for you to say it like 5 times. I'm like, he's gonna get to what I was thinking, isn't he? And then he just never quite got there. I'm like, okay, I got to talk to him about this.
Just left it for you there.
Big enough. Yeah.
And so your version of it is slightly different, of course. Well, it's a fair bit different. But the idea is that like I was thinking of more like, I don't know. I've just got a bunch of pieces. Sometimes I don't try to put them all together. Like in some sense, the others seem like the spirits that were in the trees that got ripped out. But the spirits of the trees might just be green men in a typical like dryad sacred tree kind of setup where the green men is the walking avatar in a symbiotic relationship. And so if you sacrifice the green men, that's the same thing as killing the tree spirit or whatever. So your version that wants people, sacrificed and strapped up to trees, those would be green men. And this is the same thing as probably the last hero's companions all dying. I always talk about the last hero math, and we see this repeated iteration of a dozen people plus one that get sacrificed or get magically upgraded, or they have Lightbringer weapons. We see all these things that tells us, okay, the last hero's companions who died, they were resurrected, and the first Night's Watch was made of resurrected people. However, those sacrifices, there's a thing where, and this is probably a little left field, but the Night's Watch and the others, the brothers and the black brothers and the white others, they are two sides of the coin, and their origin is tied together, in my opinion. Like, the others are created and the Watch is created to deal with them. They are linked, and it might even be as simple as like green men are killed, the spirits become the others, and the bodies are resurrected as like zombie watchmen. But you want to strap the bodies up to the trees, so that's okay. I will allow that. And
well, do you want to know why I think? Okay, so in my view of the Weirwood system and what it's doing, you want to know why I think you build the Night's Watch and why you put people on the other side for them to fight all the time?
Yes.
Because
I'm trying. Do we want to do that next? Because that is an obvious question. There's a couple other questions in the chat that are obvious too. This is all very exciting.
I'll go real quick and then we'll go to some of those super chat questions or whatever. I was just going to say, basically you have these people who are often in the Night's Watch, first night born bastards from noble houses who have this high king's blood in them. But even if not, you just send a bunch of blood to the wall and have them fight forever in an endless war on the wall, because there's a bunch of Weirwoods under the wall who need blood anyway. So if you're going to man the wall, yes, you're manning it against the others, and they potentially were manning it because the others went rogue on the children in the first men at some point and started killing them, and they actually needed to build defenses against them. But from the Weirwoods' point of view, this is a constant system that guarantees a drip, drip, drip of blood feeding into them forever. And if the Night's Watch is constantly manned by, as I said, first night babies from noble houses, you're getting constant king's blood into the wall forever.
Interesting. It does seem there's a wrongness about the Night's Watch walking atop the ice wall. Like, they don't belong on top of that.
George is not a fan of essentially sacrificing children to militaristic pursuits. So these militaristic orders, like the constant baby sacrifice
people, yes.
All of the sacrifice to the Weirwoods is people being thrown into the meat grinders of war, because the Weirwoods, as I just pointed out, if that is what's going on, the trees are creating an endless war to feed themselves blood. And the systems of power do that in real life somewhat as well. In George, I think, is mirroring that in his magic. It's a militaristic sort of system.
That's very interesting, and I like it when the magic themes or the magic theories line up with the themes of the story, as you know. That's what I think George excels at doing, and I think that is the key to doing fantasy world building, is to always tie it to the heart and conflict, character work stuff. Don't think about it as separate. Make it reflective.
Exactly.
But, okay, so the one thing I wanted to say before we get to the super chats is that Melisandre looks like a Weirwood tree, even though she is a fire priestess and burns Weirwoods and stuff. Symbolically, she is one of the many characters that look like Weirwood trees and then get the Weirwood stigmata, where their hands turn bloody, they might have bloody eyes, bloody mouth, bloody hair. So Catelyn does it twice, famously. Varamir, when he's trying to invade Thistle, she bites her tongue and claws her eyes, so she looks like a Weirwood tree. And this is important because there is... okay. Melisandre bursts the shadow babies. She symbolizes a Weirwood tree. Yeah. So, if the others are parallel to the shadow babies, which they are, they're just white shadow assassins instead of black shadow assassins, and they stick around instead of, well, we don't know what the shadow babies do actually when they're done working. We assume, but we don't know. The others stick around. And so this has always been a parallel. Melisandre is like a Night's Queen figure to Stannis. And this is how Durrandon, an old collaborator friend of mine, sort of cracked the code about Night's Queen. It's saying, Night's Queen might have been somebody like Melisandre, an ice priestess, and she's birthing these shadows. because this is what it says. Night's Queen takes Night's King's seed and soul, and then they are caught sacrificing to the others. But sacrificing to the others means giving your babies to the others. Except for Night's Queen is the other. She doesn't need to give the babies to the others. It means that she is making the others with the seed from Night's King. And that's what Mel's doing, is taking Stannis' seed and making the shadow babies. So the parallel is set up very well, and it's reinforced by the fact that both Melisandre and Night's Queen characters are Weirwood characters. So, for example, Lyanna is a Night's Queen character. What does she do? Dresses up as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, a walking Weirwood warrior. Right. That is kind of like Night's Queen giving birth to an other. Lyanna is showing us from Night's Queen to an other, a Weirwood, a white Weirwood warrior, a walker of the wood. So, yeah, I think the parallel is really strong with the others being like shadows of the trees. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I thought of something in there that I was going to say, and then I lost it. So if you want to go to us onto Super Chat, it may come back to me. Yeah.
Pearl Emperor versus the Lion of Night, ancient historical foil for the day. How does that connect besides just the long night? I don't understand the question. Pearl Emperor versus the Lion of Night. Well, the Pearl Emperor built the 5 forts to keep the demons of the Lion of Night at bay. How does that connect besides just the long night? Well, it implies that there could have been previous long nights or previous problems with demonic monsters before the long night. But
yeah, I've talked about that. I have a quick thought on that. It's just like the thing that makes me think it might be different long nights is how different the monsters are described, right? Like there's these things that are very similar to the others coming in the night. But like the 5 forts are built to keep away monsters that are described as like dragon-like almost, whereas the others are more icy-like. So I think what George is hinting at, and it depends on what we figure out the corruption sort of this Weirwood system was and what the creation of the others was in the first place. But I think what he's kind of hinting at is throughout the world, you have these magical systems that can be used as a conduit for power, whether it's stone or the trees or the moon or whatever. And people will try to corrupt that to serve themselves. And it's like within human nature to try and corrupt these sources of power over time. So anywhere you have these incredibly powerful magical sources, you're going to run into similar but slightly different in, form problems. So there was maybe a similar issue 10,000 years ago in Essos that caused a long night locally and caused them to have dragon-like others. But it may be a similar sin, rather. Like there was the blood betrayal and whatever happened to cause the creation of the others may have been similar betrayals of like, maybe it was a sacrifice of a family member or something that's just like antithetical to what George views as good, and then therefore led to magically negative results in a similar way. I think that's kind of what he's doing there with the similar, like history rhyming in that magical way is him just hinting at like, this is human nature when presented with magical power. We're gonna do these things that lead to bad results sometimes.
And this also, multiple long nights also fits well with moon meteor theory in general, which is just the idea that like, the asteroid stream, like the Torrid stream that we pass through twice a year, that is the remnants of a giant comet that broke up a long time ago. And so the planet's orbits are like this. The Torrid stream is like this, and it's really big. And we pass through both sides of it every year. There are some killers in the Torrid stream, and scientists have speculated certain big meteors maybe came from there. It's one of the things that we watch when you hear about the scientists trying to keep track of the Earth kill. Like the Torrid stream is where they're looking. So like that's the remnants of a comet. So these multiple long nights, it could be that sorcerers like the Bloodstone Emperor know how to call the comets. A lot of the stories suggest the wizards are calling the comets. Maybe that's it. Or maybe there's an orc cloud and every once in a while they drop in. Or maybe the moon was broken a long effing time ago and there's little pieces of it that fall down and cause a long night every once in a while.
Yeah. Yep. I think I lean towards something like that, where the moon breaking a long time ago was someone a long time ago doing something bad with a similar method that corrupted the Weirwoods. So like now we're just dealing with the magical fallout of these ancient actions in multiple different places in the world, and our story is going to be focused mostly on the one going on in Westeros, but there are probably similar issues in other places.
Yes, and you're right about the power. George is not going to show us any totally pure before time. Like there's always the struggle is perpetual, right?
Yeah.
So it's Michael. Weirwood, and there was another one about the Weirwood. Okay, yeah, Bong Hits and Heavy Riffs says Weirwood and weird as in the weirding way. No, that's Dune. I'm sorry. Dune got that from Norse mythology. The Volvas were said to weird walk for magic and prophetic reasons beyond the Weird Garth stuff, which we'll talk about. I wonder if George meant, yeah, certainly, because the Weirwoods are so closely related to Yggdrasil. He's doing stuff with the Norns in some places. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not even cryptic. Like the Weirwoods are prophetic and used for magic. So yeah, absolutely, that's part of it too. And that's what George likes is these confluences of things. He's like, oh, weird and weir, but if it's a river of time, he puts it all together.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, exactly.
And then let's see here. There was one I skipped. No, right here. Michael James, does the Weirwood paste infect the drinker with spores, allowing them to merge with the trees psychically to see through them, and later psychically when they become entangled in the trees? I would say so, because Bloodraven has a mushroom on his cheek.
Oh yeah, that works. Yeah, I mean
out.
that would make sense to me. Like you would need the Weirwood organism to like link with them internally somehow, so that would make sense to me if it's spores.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How many ingredients can we put into Weirwood paste?
Yeah.
Don't forget the mushrooms.
Yeah.
Cool. Summertime says, question for Michael, do you think the others will cross the wall or destroy? This is one thing I was thinking of when you were talking. It's like, oh, well, if the wall is actually giving them immortality and preserving their original green man frozen bodies in there, not unlike the 79 Sentinels, which we'll talk about, then would the others want to break the wall?
So I would
or
think
need to.
if it is set up in that way, I would think that like if you're building this system with intent to preserve yourself, you would have a situation where the ward breaks well before the magic that sustains your body, right? So like if the Weirwoods are barely getting any blood and any worship and any magical power, maybe they won't be able to sustain the ward because whatever little bit you have would be going to sustaining the bodies or just keeping the Weirwoods themselves alive, right? So like I could see a situation where, because if the point of the others is to come back and put people in line if they don't follow the Weirwoods or the old ways, you would want them to be able to pass the wall if needed, right? Like if people weren't following the old ways, you want the others to be able to come back past the wall and say, hey, remember why you sacrificed to these trees, guys. You rough everyone up and then go away for a while and they'll get back to worshiping the trees again. If the others are completely rogue at this point and like the children and the humans built the wall genuinely to keep them away and it's some like slightly different setup, then then maybe they wouldn't be able to or then they would maybe need to destroy the wall to pass it. But like I could see a situation where maybe like you could blow the horn of Joramun, the ice wall and the wards come down, but the bodies are still sustained there so that the others can go past and do what they do.
The Horn of Joramun. I didn't even think about that. If it is capable of bringing down the wall, I think it's more cryptic than that. Because the wall's going to fall via meteor, and some of the horns can call meteors, which is a more elaborate process. But it could be like a fail-safe mechanism of some kind.
Do you want my little take on what I think might be the foreshadowing of the magic to bring down the wall for the Horn of Joramun?
No, not yet.
Let's save that. We'll save that for... I know, we could just go down any tangent.
There's so much. You just talked about... Okay. All right, so my Ice Spiders theory, the key thing about the Ice Spiders theory is ties directly into what you're saying. Okay, so...
Yeah.
basically the frozen trees, if you haven't heard this theory, guys, the frozen trees, when trees get frozen, the branches weigh down. And so they begin to curl down and they touch the, oh, by the way, check out my cool stag, my burning stag shirt, everyone. Yes. So the branches curl down and they sit on the ground and they hunch and they end up looking like frozen spiders. Okay. Yeah. And so when George says that the others ride down on the winds of winter, or they ride on the ice spiders, he's talking about the others being greenseers, and they're using frozen weirwood trees. Those are the ice spiders. Now, at the center of the ice spider is a vampiric mouth where people feed babies to. Okay, and so in Craster's village, we see a burnt baby's skull in the mouth of the weirwood. And so what I speculated and put together, there's symbolism behind this, but basically what it boils down to is that the way that Craster and other wildlings give babies to the others, which they call giving their sons to the wood, they don't just leave them on the ground, they put them in the heart tree mouths, and the others don't come and pick them up. They suck the energy out of the baby using the weirwood, leave the husk right in the mouth, and then the wildlings come along and they burn the corpse, because we've seen the frozen corpses go up like this the next day as a funeral. And so that is how it is done. And so essentially the frozen weirwoods are like ice, are like spiders. They're vampires. They're drinking the blood, because that's what spiders do. Yeah. Like they drink out of their corpse and then just leave the husk. So the weirwoods are literally doing this literal spider thing to these babies. So I have basically said, and I guess I could have said this more simply, but we joke about White Walker daycare, right? Like if you give the others a baby, what do? They raise it and teach it how to speak Scroth and send it to White Walker daycare. Like, no, obviously not. And it doesn't really make sense for them to just wave their hands and see the baby sprout up into an ice demon. That's not how it works. So it seems obvious that they are taking the life and magic of the child somehow and using it to sustain themselves. I don't even think they're turning those kids into new White Walkers, because the White Walkers, as we'll talk about, are an exiled hive mind. They're twins. They move together. They're not individuals. They're a hive mind. So you can't make new White Walkers. And if you kill one, I don't think they go anywhere either.
Right. So I have a theory for how they're making the new White Walkers that I call the reverse Craster theory, which is essentially if you give the White Walkers a baby male, they're going to go and they're going to strap it up to the weirwood however you need to and wait for it to grow up to an age where you can do shadow baby making with it. So the girls are being kept by Craster, raised until they are an age for baby making. The boys are being taken and strapped to trees until they are an age for baby making. And that's how they're birthing new others. Is there's some Night Queen type figure in the modern times north of the wall somewhere who has these babies like strapped to a weirwood grove somewhere or something.
So White Walker daycare is a root prison. Yes. Well, that is appealing because it is horrific. You know, these reveals should be horrible in some way, psychologically or literally. That's an interesting theory that does make more sense than obviously daycare.
Tap on the forehead and then they turn, you know.
However, what I think that if you're talking about feeding blood, like listen to your own theory. You're saying that the original other bodies under the wall constantly need blood to perpetuate the existence of the others. So what I'm saying is that when they take these babies, that, they don't need to make new others. What they need to do is just take that life spirit and add it to the hive mind that sustains them, which is sort of essentially feeding those original other corpses.
Yeah, that of course would rely on them like needing to have created more shadows, which they may not need to do. There may have been enough birthed, you know, way back in the day. But if there was new ones being created, I think that's what you would need to do.
And think about how think about how horrific that is. Like Sam killed one with the knife, but it's like, but did he? Did he? He might have just popped the body there, and that cost them some mana or whatever. But I don't think there are like a finite number of others. I think they can only manifest so many bodies or whatever, but like They're a
It
hive
would
mind. I really do think so. Do you agree with that?
Well, so I would say it would depend. If they are cast in the way that I think, it could be a case where the Night King, before he was stopped from doing whatever he was going to do, he cast 100 shadows. And now, if he's buried below the wall and hasn't been able to get near the Night Queen for 10,000 years, he probably hasn't cast any more of those shadows. But if someone else casts a shadow who's also a greenseer, that shadow's also part of the Weirwood hive mind. So, like, as long as there would be greenseers strapped to the trees, you have the ability to cast new shadows from the same hive mind. So, like, it could be a situation. I could see a situation where there's a finite number of shadows cast, but, like, until you remove the source, you don't solve the problem. Or I could see a situation sort of like you say, where, like, the trees just have a certain power level that they have at the moment, and that determines how many they can manifest. But
And to be clear, this is maybe this is just an idea. It's definitely
all
a very
speculation.
speculative. Like, I consider moon meteors. Moon meteors is headcanon. It's not coming out of here until we see a new long night with no moon meteors. Until then, I'm going to believe. But yeah, no, this is just me sort of thinking about all this to be like, what if the others that, you don't, because the thing is, if you could just break, if there's 12 of them and you just have to break 12 of them, then theoretically you could eliminate the threat with enough Valyrian steel and dragons and shit.
Right.
And the others, honestly, they break pretty easy. They're one-hit kills.
Yeah.
It's like, if you were an other, you would hang back and send armies of the dead at your enemies. You wouldn't go anywhere near the front lines because you're a one-hit kill. But what if? What if? Like I said, what if it's not that way? What if... Well, okay, so my point is that, like, we all think that dealing with the others is going to be more complex than just chopping them because of George and his themes and all that stuff. This is a broken thing that needs to be healed. There needs to be reconciliation. There's a division. Themes all through. The reconciliation is such a strong thing. So if you could just chop them all, then that means you could do that. And I think we're going to find out that, like, you can't beat them by just fighting them.
Yeah, there's a TV trope that's called fighting shadows, that I literally think we're gonna have them fighting shadows because the others are literal shadows. And the trope is that you're fighting an enemy that turns out to be useless to fight because you're just killing the shadow of something larger, more complex somewhere else. And it's like fighting, like, the root. Like, it's like fighting a voter in a political system rather than fighting, like, the root causes that cause them to, like, react and think that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's the equivalent
100%.
to the endless, useless argument versus taking on the source of the problem. So that I think if that's what happens, if we get a war with the others where they're killing some of the shadows, but it turns out it's not going to ever matter until you deal with the Weirwood system as a whole, the reform of the Weirwood system is in the end going to be that reform you're talking about. And the reform of the old ways as a whole into new ways is, I think, the main point that I talk about. Yeah.
Right. And we'll get into that. And so I think there should be some moment like that when they realize, like, we can't kill them. We can't, that's not going to work. Like, we got to do something else. And this would be a great way. It's like, to see that, like, you can shatter their bodies, but that's not, like, they don't really die. They're not really going anywhere.
Yeah.
I also think they're going to, at some point, when something changes magically, I think they're going to be able to manifest right out of the heart trees in the Godswoods. I think they're literally going to pop out of the trees.
That can make sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's going to be terrifying.
If the wards that are guarding everything are Weirwood-based wards, if they were able to somehow, like, flip the magic, like you said, or, like, flip some switch, change some variable in the Weirwood system, yeah, I would think that would be plausible, that all of a sudden they're just showing up inside. Because, again, if you were the Weirwoods are in charge of setting up this entire system, that would be an ability you would want. If the kings rule from their magically protected castles that are protected by you, the Weirwoods, you would want a way for your agents, your shadows, to pop in and be like, hey, buddy, why aren't you giving us babies lately? Like,
And
what's
so
going
this
on
may
here?
be part of why they don't really need to break the wall to cross it. They might not need to walk. The army of the dead will, but the
Yeah.
others might be able to appear in a godswood near you once certain magical things are accomplished.
I
So
could see that. The physical break of the wall and the magical break of the wall may be two different things. The dead zombie corpses may need to physically break the wall to get through, but yeah, the magical break of the wall could come differently.
probably
And
they'll
then
be the
probably
same, but I
others.
just want to point out that like they may
Right.
have a way around that we haven't thought of. So let me go back to these. We got a couple more. And there was one in particular that was very on topic. Do the OG Valerians fit into this Weirwood theory? Only tangentially in the sense that Azor Ahai is one of the OG, not Valerians. Great Empire of the Dawn is who you're talking about. Yeah, so he's kind of starting all this. And in a sense, when Night's Queen takes a seed in Soul of Night's King to make the others, she's taking dragon fire. She's taking the dragon seed of Azor Ahai and making ice dragons with him. And the others are like ice dragons in many ways. So that's why they got the
Yeah,
meteor eyes.
and I would say, like, also, if you were talking about a lot of just the, like, how does old Valyria parallel this stuff, it's what I talked about, where George is getting at the idea of when presented with magical systems of power, people will use them in a certain way. And in Valyria, I think you can see a lot of the remnants of a culture that, like, tried to take magical power in such a way that it eventually destroyed itself. And in Westeros, they tried to take magical power slightly differently in a way that rather than destroying everything, locked everything into like it's ice and fire, right? It's fire destroys and consumes, ice like preserves and freezes and locks into place. And they're the two end results for how these systems that are old and at the end of their lifetime can look. A system gets to the end of its useful cycle and like ends up in one of these two systems in one of these two ways, and then because the system is no longer serving the purpose of the people as a whole that are making up the system, they eventually break and reform the system. And I think that's what will happen in these books.
Look at you using the words in the thumbnail title. System, system, system.
Yeah,
Good job.
exactly.
And so we'd see here. Maybe I've missed some theorizing somewhere, but the Summer Isles have talking trees. I'm curious about the implications for the Weirwoods. So I'm just pulling up the quote about this. The talking, yeah, it says much of this was recorded in carvings made by priestesses on the famous talking trees of Tall Trees Town. So we've got talking trees and carved trees. Obviously, this makes us think of the Weirwoods.
Yeah.
So it could
Similar
be that they have
systems
secret
all
weird.
over.
What's that?
Sorry. I just said similar systems all over the world. Whether they're all linked or not, I don't know for sure.
And we were going to talk later about cousin species idea. And this could be, it could be that like this is all the same root ball under the earth, but the trees flower with different color leaves in different places.
Yeah.
It could be that they are, even though the roots go really deep, they are still tree organisms. Okay, they just are really deep underground, and that
It's
there
like a
are
mat.
multiple systems of them in different places.
It's like a big mat of root layer under Westeros. It doesn't like reach the core of the planet and link with every other continent.
Just
right?
like
It
a
could be
fungal
that.
body, essentially. So
Yeah. Right.
it could be that there are multiple species of magic trees. In the Reach, we hear about the oak trees, where Garth Green made the oaken seat out of an oak tree. It makes the oaks sound magical. And then we got the shade trees, obviously. So it could be that there are multiple species of magic tree. It kind of would make
It would
sense.
almost make the most sense, yeah, because George, like, when he was asked if there are other magical animals in Westeros besides the wolves, he said all animals in Westeros are magical. So, like, it would also kind of make sense if it's all trees are magical. It's just the Weirwoods are the ones that people have been using for thousands of years and have sacrificed blood to for 10,000 years, and that's why their magic is in a different state than the magic of oak trees, which haven't been worshipped. So if someone had been worshipping oak trees for as long as Weirwoods, maybe they would be the ones with bloody faces and all the same stuff.
Or it could be that there's something unique about Weirwoods being eternal that makes them more magically powerful. Because
That too, yeah.
Bloodraven even says, "Oh, oaks live a long time, but weirwoods are eternal." So there's something different about weirwoods. Timmy asks, construction of the wall caused the moon breaking. No, I did not say that. It all kind of happened around the long night, but no.
Yeah.
The moon breaking, if it was caused by anything on Earth, it was the abomination of the murder of Nissa Nissa and the blood magic that went along with it. Benjamin here is linking the creation of the wall to the creation of the other. So they could be connected, but it wasn't like building the wall broke the moon. That's not really implied in the myth.
No, but so what I kind of see in those two events is an ice and fire parallel of one another, right? If the wall was built to create this immortality machine for these ancient people, and the others were created in the building of the wall, I could see a situation where on the fiery side, the blood betrayal could have been used to grab magical power, and if the dragons were supposedly created when a moon broke up and got too close to the sun, well, if the breaking of the moon created the dragons, was the breaking of the moon a result of some giant magical spell? Like, it all links together in a way where I could see, like, whatever long night type thing is going on with the five forts and whatever's happening in Ashai could have been a result of the breaking of the moon, which could have been done because some ancient person was trying to take a natural magical power source and corrupt it for their own ends. Yes. In the same way that building the wall corrupted the world tree. So the moon and the world tree could have been corrupted in different events with similar outlines for how they took place.
And this is a good place to hype up. One of the next lore summons that we're going to do will be with Michael and Eldrick Stoneskin. Although Eldrick has, and it's going to be about Elden Ring. Both Michael and Eldrick Stoneskin are Elden Ring experts. And Eldrick, who is in our Discord, I should
know
that
things
word
about it. I know enough to talk about it.
Experienced players familiar with the lore and also familiar with my theories and with your own theories. So Eldrick sent me, he's in our Discord, he sent me an outline, a very detailed outline for the stream. Eldrick, I apologize. I meant to already send you a message and be like, hey, is it cool if we have Michael talks about stuff on our Elden Ring stream? I'm assuming that it is, though, because I know you guys are friends also. So
we had talked earlier about doing a stream, so I'm sure he'll hopefully be okay with it.
So there you go. So I plan to have both those guys on so we can have what will probably be like a 10-hour stream talking about the world tree and all that stuff. So just look for that. That'll be a lore summit as well. Yeah. The Bloodstone Emperor worshipped the black meteor, and I think he's the one that caused the black meteor to fall to Earth. So it's logical to wonder if he did it on purpose because he wanted the magic power.
Yes.
If we used to have two moons, they were probably moons of ice and fire because everything is ice and fire. And more importantly, the moon women in the story either are ice or fire or they transform. We see all those things. So I speculated a long time ago that we must have ice and fire moons. The fire moon's the one that got broke, and those fire moon meteors fell to Earth. That's the oily black stone. And so we see Bloodstone Emperor using this moon because the whole thing is like, why are the seasons messed up? Because they were regulated by the moons. That's the answer. Magic world, ice and fire moons, they orbit cleanly, and that's where the seasons come from. I guarantee that's what he's going to say. I don't guarantee, but I think that's what he's going to say.
It's that or the tree. It's that or the world tree. Like, it's one. I think we're on the same page. We just maybe have slight variations on what it could be. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the tree in combination with two moons. I think
the trees are always trying to pull the moon down and scratch its face and break it and stuff. Yeah. So I mean, he's definitely
linked the two heavily. Yeah, they're connected. They're part of a connected magical system, which we should have talked about when we explained the Weirwood system. Like when I said the Weirwoods are a conduit for the old god's magic, I could literally see a situation where that all channels through the moon, and the trees are like little antennas poking up out of the ground, to catch that energy. And it's all because Jon has a wolf dream where he's hearing his brothers through the moon. It's he's hearing them howling at the moon and all this stuff. And there's a bunch of little things like that. So I think the moon could be a part of this whole connected Weirwood system for sure as well.
No, this is exactly what I was hoping for. So again, this is an older idea that I've had. I don't talk about it as much because like it's not, I mean, there's a lot of commentary on the moon in the story, but people want to think about John and Danny. They want to think about Sothorios. I just got tired of saying fire moon, ice moon. I felt like Dora. I was like, this is headcanon. These things aren't like,
Yeah.
I can only go so far with this. So there's Io symbolism and Europa symbolism, and Europa is a frozen moon and Io is a volcanic moon. But with the Elden Ring stuff, it has encouraged you and us to think about, well, if these moons are magic and they are tied to ice and fire and they're governing the seasons, then they are directly connected to the planet. How would they be connected to the planet? Probably through the world tree, which might be what the planet is anyway. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's all a big whole system. Like you pick the exact correct topic for what to title the stream, because that is kind of how I view what George has set up here. It's a whole big thing. I say that a lot. It's a whole big thing. So,
it's a whole thing. Yeah.
Just
cool.
Because eventually you run out of different ways to try and explain like what's going on. You're just like, it's a big thing, guys. If you don't get it by now,
watch all my videos. I explained it back there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Ion, for cheering us on here. Could the black bark trees be a sort of dead node on the Weirwood net? Yes. Left over from the OG Long Night? Yes. Both trees give you visions. The Ephekevron forgot. So I think the Ephekevron, well, we got to talk about them. We don't know what kind of trees they had. They do seem to have had magic trees. I would guess they were Weirwoods, but we don't know.
Yeah,
we just don't.
It's tough to say, but yeah.
But we're going to talk about the shade trees. We've got a whole section on the shade trees, so that's coming Namo. And the short answer is yes, they very much could be. Y'all are hot, yeah. Woo! Not bad.
Nothing hotter than doing a double thumbs up.
Yeah. It matches your mustache.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to the matter at hand.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the blood sacrifice. The Wolf's Den speech is really incredible. It's kind of a long passage, but it's the jailer. Bartimus One Eye, and there's Garth, and I forget who's speaking, but those are the two jailers. And so we were talking about Weirwoods as prisons, and this is tied to the idea that weirs are fish traps. A fish garth or a fishing weir is it traps the fish. And the greenseers are trapped in the roots. And maybe the others are being held back by wards. And so they are kind of trapped on the one side of the wall or one side of the Weirwood net. So there's a lot of trap symbolism. And then we go to this prison called the Wolf's Den, and it's taken over by this enormous Weirwood, and one of the jailers' name is Garth. And it's just like, oh, God. And so he's, of course, talking about Brandon Ice Eyes and how he came down on the slavers in the Wolf's Den, and the people that had been slaves then chained to the former or they sacrificed to the Weirwoods. They cut up their limbs and festooned their intestines in the branches and stuff. Sounds like a party. So this is the most, and then he sort of hints that like, yeah, we still do this. Y'all Southern people think we don't, but we do. You know?
I have that quote. I think that's one of the ones I added at some point.
Oh, dig into it. Let's see.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm looking for where it is. Under Corrupted Weirwoods. The bottom one under Corrupted Weirwoods. It's just the key part of that quote is just Davos saying, I never knew that Northmen made blood sacrifice to their heart trees. There's much and more you Southerns do not know about the North, Sir Bartimus replied. So that's
okay.
That's the heart of the thing is it's when Davos and Sir Bartimus are going back and forth, and he tells Davos right before that his ancestors were just as like as not to have strung entrails up in the heart tree or something like that. So.
Oh yeah. I am told I missed a good question here. From Kim. Are the Weirwood trees and the world hinges related? Oh yes, this is the one I wanted to get. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you, all my mods. Yes, the Weirwood trees and the world hinges. So hinges of the world that we know of are basically Ashai and the Wall. One speculates Winterfell, the God's Eye, almost certainly. Yeah. Maybe even a place like Dragonstone. But certainly Ashai and the Wall. Now, someone recently on YouTube suggested in a comment that Ashai might have been built of Weirwood. And this is Dan Kelly. Ashai was made of Weirwood. The poison inverts the Weirwoods to Ulthos purple, shade of the evening trees. And then they petrify into oily black stone. So, I guess we'll just get into this. This is referencing a theory from Disputed Lands. You guys know Crowfood's daughter. She has a video about the oily black stone and basically is saying that it is petrified shade of the evening tree. So just as the Weirwoods turn to pale stone, the shade trees would petrify into black stone. And the shade drink is oily and greasy, and it's of the evening. So the greasy, oily black stone that is dark and tied to the long night, you can see how thematically they are related.
Yeah.
Now,
it would make sense, yeah.
I'll give this to you in a second. But basically, me and Amanda have had a little bit of a laugh because I think the meteors, the oily black stone, lands in Stygia and then poisons the Weirwoods and the stone. It basically poisons everything in the Shadowlands Peninsula. It turns it all dead and weird, just like the color out of space from Lovecraft. So whatever Ashai was built out of beforehand, regular stone, it all turns to oily stone. All the plants die. The ghost grass starts growing everywhere. The river is polluted. It's not just the stone. It's the whole peninsula. And so my theory is the meteor is what creates the poisoning. And it affects the whole peninsula. The oily stone is then mined from there and carried elsewhere. Or there could be other meteor deposits, maybe one in Sothorios. But the point is, she thinks that the oily stone comes from the trees, and I think the trees were turned oily by the stone. But we are both saying they are related. So this is a new twist, saying, well, maybe Ashai was built out of Weirwood, which is an appealing idea, because I do think there were greenseers and Weirwoods in Ashai, which is getting back to the hinge of the world question. It could be that all hinges of the world are tied to Weirwoods, and Ashai could be that. So start in on that anywhere you want.
Yeah, so I like the theory that the oily stone is petrified shade trees. Like, I think that that's, like, logical, reasonable, like, one of the theories that has a decent chance of being correct. I also have recently been beginning to lean towards, because of Elden Ring things again, that Ashai, the stone that seems to drink in light in Ashai, could be fallen moon stone from that broken moon that was corrupted, because I view it similar to the Wall, where it was corrupted to take this magical power, and instead of corrupting and destroying the world tree, you broke the moon and probably called it down to earth to do a bunch of damage, and then use the magical stone that you bring forth. So I think they probably built their city out of this magical stone that was called down to earth from the moon. And maybe back when they built it, it was in a different state. Like, it could be similar. Because I think one of the things that happens with systems of power in the real world is like with, say, feudalism. It seems like a great idea to start doing feudalism when you're a farmer and all of a sudden you have a bunch of bandits roll by and take all your crops. You're like, well, dang, I wish we had an army that was organized and we had a castle we could go hide in. And then feudalism springs up. But nowadays, if you were told, hey, let's go back to being feudal serfs, you'd be like, well, no, that system is terrible. That seems like a bad idea because that system's worn out its welcome. So, like, in Ashai, maybe a long time ago, they were built out of, like, this magically powerful stone that made everything great and awesome. 10,000 years later, it's drinking in all of the light and there are no children in Ashai, but it's still very magically powerful. And it was like a slow buildup and slow corruption there potentially as well. I've thought about that. But I
Pearl Palanquin.
Sorry?
The Pearl Palanquin.
What's that one again? Sorry.
The original God Emperor was carried around by in a pearl palanquin that 100 of his wives held up. and this son is called the Pearl Emperor. And so, right at the beginning, it's like, well, what's this pearl? Is that the moon?
Yeah.
And so, is his moon, his palanquin is the moon? Is he like a wizard that is connected to the
would make
moon?
sense.
Is he flying? Is he doing astral projection? Is there a white moon meteor somewhere that Dawn's made out of? That's the palanquin?
Yeah. Well, because I could see it being the uncorrupted state of the moon would be that white stone, sort of like what Dawn could be made out of potentially. Because, like, if you have a normal moon, what does it do? It reflects the light. If you have a corrupted moon, it's going to drink in the light. It's the corrupted version of a moonstone when it drinks in the light, in my opinion.
And well, scientifically, it's also correct. Io, volcanic moons like Io, they are the dimmest type of objects because their entire surface is like black basalt and stuff. It does not reflect light. Meanwhile, an ice moon like Enceladus or Europa are the brightest type of moons. So yes, that is all.
Sense.
And Dawn is spelled out as an ice sword in multiple ways. Check out my 2 videos. Dawn is the original ice. Have you watched those, Michael?
If I did, it was a while ago, but I remember that title. So yeah, chance I have, but not recently.
It's actually my simplest theory. It goes like this: the last hero was probably a Stark, right? Duh. He has a dog. The story's told to Bran. It's probably a Stark with a dog. Yeah. So last hero's Dragonsteel, probably Dawn, right? Dawn is a meteor sword, so it could be Dragonsteel. It's the only magic sword that comes from ancient times in Westeros, and it's it's tied to bringing the light and the dawn. And then the Night's Watch are like, I am the sword that brings the dark, that brings the light in the darkness. Yada yada yada. So if you say, okay, well, the last hero was probably a Stark, and he probably had Dawn. What's a Stark doing carrying Dawn? That's one question. But the first thing that you should realize is like, oh, that's why they have this tradition going back to the Age of Heroes of naming their swords ice, is because the first and greatest Stark had a big white sword that looks like a stick of ice. Because when we see the bones of the others, they are pale as milk glass, just like Dawn. And so I've always joked, well, Dawn's made out of the shin bone of another, obviously. But no, it just means that it's of an icy nature. George is using the same words. The other swords are alive with moonlight. Dawn is alive with light. Right. The wall is also alive with light.
Yep, that's another one. Dawn, like whenever I draw this moonlight Weirwood connection, I always point out Dawn as well. Like Dawn seems connected to the Weirwood system in some way or another. What level that is, actually, I don't know. I also do kind of really like the theory that the original Stark ice was an ice sword the way that the others have. Like the others like gave them one ice sword as like part of like a... Because I think the Weirwoods gave power to the kings to like patrol other people. So like the Starks having an icy other sword kind of works.
He stole it.
It would be a big...
It's Dragonsteel because he stole it from Night's King, just like Ned stole it from Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy. It's a whole thing. So that's it's stealing Dawn. So Night King steals the Dawn by causing the long night, and you end it by stealing Dawn back from him and killing him with it.
Okay,
that works. So I think we're going to find out Arthur Dayne was killed by Dawn somehow at the Tower of Joy.
That is what the show showed us in their show version.
They did. And so, that's what I think we'll see. And so I think that's what happened. I think the last hero, with the help of the Children of the Forest, he broke his sword. But the thing is, because if Azor Ahai is Night's King, Azor Ahai comes from the Great Empire of the Dawn, where they have the pale fire swords and the pearl palanquin, maybe a white meteor. So Azor Ahai brings Dawn to Westeros as Azor Ahai, but then he turns into Night's King. He still has the sword. He has Dawn. So, last hero had to steal it from him, somehow with the help of the children, and then he has a weapon that the others can't stand against.
Makes sense.
Anyway, that's a little far afield. And I do need to go get Cleo. So let's move on here. Let's go back in the outline and see where we've already destroyed this outline.
I knew we were going to destroy the outline. I think we both have that tendency, and I think we build off of each other, and like we both enjoy. Oh, that's a good tangent. Let's talk about that real quick.
I had to cut you off twice too. I was like, no, wait, just wait.
I know, I know.
Yeah,
I'm bad with that.
I thought this outline would hold up for like at least 10 minutes, but it didn't. It was just torn to shreds right away. So all the I want something I can set you loose on for a couple minutes. I want to come back to the dead bodies in a minute. What were you saying about the Night's Watch?
Um, about how essentially like the war between them and the wildlings is just kind of a useless war perpetuated to feed blood to the Weirwoods potentially. Or is it something else? Oh, there was something I was trying to remember. Oh yeah. So the Night King. I could talk about how some different take on the Night King potentially. How
Do that. I will
him
turn the
being
speaker
removed
up
from
so that I
history.
can
Yeah.
listen, and I will mute myself, and I'll be back in 60 seconds. Thank you.
All right. So this was something that I was going to bring up earlier when we were talking about the Knights King and Queen sacrificing to the others. Because like one thing that's really interesting about the Night's King story is that he was intentionally wiped from the history books. So that's like something you have to keep in mind when you're taking in any account of the Night King. So the idea that we know that he was sacrificing to the others is interesting because we don't know really anything else about him. And what me and David were talking about earlier is if potentially the Knights King and Queen were um, creating the others rather than just sacrificing to the others. That's the exact type of thing you would want to remove from the history books, was the point I was going to make. Is like, if whatever they were doing was actually how you created the others in the first place, if he was strapped up to a weirwood tree and they were making weirwood shadow babies, they would wipe that from the history books and just say, hey, he was sacrificing to the others, he's a bad dude. Because you don't want it's like if someone was like, you know, doing bad actions in society, you wouldn't want the news to just be like, and here is a detailed outline of exactly how he did it and exactly what he did and how he planned it out. You would just be like, they were doing bad things, we don't talk about them, wiped from the history books. So like that was the thing that I was gonna bring up earlier. If you're back and all good to go now, I don't need to go more off topic about the Night King.
Yes, clearly I'm good to go here.
All right.
Just about. Sorry. It's dusty in the
Yeah.
bird room. Sometimes when I walk in the bird room, I start coughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
It'll happen.
so okay. So your different take on Night's King, quote unquote,
Well,
boils down to
I didn't quite get to the whole different take, but if you're back already, I don't need to go on the whole tangent. My different take was basically that it seems like Bloodraven and potentially Bran are doing a lot of things that are similar to things that the Night's King may have been doing. And so my question with that is like, if that's the case, is Night's King actually someone who acted against the old ways? Because if we think the reform of the old ways and potentially the destruction of the old ways is something that might need to happen, is it possible that 10,000 years ago, the Night's King recognized that the old ways were evil and a problem, tried to reform the system by using the Weirwood magic with the Night's Queen in some way or another? Maybe they created some others that were acting against the system as a whole, or they were doing something, right? But in any case, like, there's been a lot of kings who have done a lot of evil things throughout Westerosi history. Why would you need to remove this guy from the history books and, like, wipe all records of what he did? Well, if what he did was a threat to the system of power, maybe you would need to do that. So, like, if a lot of the things that we have, like, all these Night King paralleled characters who seem to be the good guys in our story at different times, maybe the reason is that some of the actions that the Night King was doing were actually like hurting the Weirwood system as a whole. And that's why the kings who all worship the old gods and the old ways for 10,000 years after he was gone, that's why they wiped him from the history books, because he was kind of on the trail of what would need to be done to destroy the system. So that's my potential. I don't know if like I'm convinced that's what's going on, but there's room for that interpretation, and I think it leads down some interesting rabbit holes.
Well, I definitely agree about sort of covering up what he actually did.
Yeah, that's less controversial. Is what I said at the beginning was like the whole covering up what he did because it was the thing that created the others was like, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm less convinced that the Night's King was actually a good guy, but I definitely think it's a possible thing.
Okay, so
But yeah,
what I wanted to say was that my head canon on, because there is some overlap, like you said, particularly when you look at the path of Azor Ahai to Night's King. You see that Bloodraven is following the archetype, and so
yeah,
is Bloodraven secretly using the others to control humanity by setting, like some people, Tony Teflon thinks that, some people think that. What I think is that the Children of the Forest and the human greenseers are babysitting a bad situation. Azor Ahai created the bad situation by invading, defiling. The others are established now. And so basically what we have is some sort of fix, like temporary patch. Like the others are sort of prevented, there's blood still going in, and things are sort of kept at a stasis, but like it doesn't feel fixed. It's not really fixed. So essentially once the Weirwood net is messed up and invaded, they've got to now keep it like limping along the way that it is, because that's the only thing they can do until Bran comes, because Bran is the key to fixing this in a permanent way. So we both agree on that. We'll get to the Bran theories later, but that's good that we're on somewhat of the same page as far as like, yeah. I don't think Bloodraven. Okay, what does this say about original Night's King? Was he a good guy? Was he doing what needed to be done? This has always been a possible thing. In fact, some people think that the last hero is Night's King, the same guy. So that could be.
Yeah. There's a lot of whenever you get that far back in the history books, it's a lot of speculation, and in my opinion, it's always just like you got to entertain it all and go down the rabbit holes to see where it ends up before you can decide like if it's worthwhile. And every time I explore the idea of the Night's King actually maybe trying to destroy the old ways, it's like, oh, that would be really interesting for this aspect and that aspect, you know.
That I've never thought of, and that cuts against a lot of my thinking, because I tend to think that there was an original Weirwood system which was better, that got all messed up. So I don't think messing it up was good.
No, I think the Night's King happened shortly after it was messed up. So the corruption happens, the wall is built, the pact happens, and then the watch is established. 100 years or so later, someone's like, actually, this is a bad system. And he becomes the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch.
That's right.
Tries to use the system against itself to break it. The King in the North and the King Beyond the Wall have to come together and say, yo, this guy's going to break the whole Weirwood system. We all worship the Weirwoods. That's why they team up to take him down, because he's a threat to the Weirwood system itself. They take him down, wipe all knowledge of him from the history books, because he was a threat to something that they both worshipped, which was, the Weirwoods.
So this is, again, why I say I want to shake up the headcanon a little bit. I have a heresy about Night's King and Queen. I think they lived during the time of the Long Night, and they're the original creators of the White Walkers. What you're referring to is what the books spell out about Night's King, which is that being the 13th Lord Commander of the Watch, and seeing Night's Queen from atop the wall. He sounds like he's coming along after the wall is built and after the watch is made. I have an explanation for why that is twisted around, but we should still consider that I'm wrong about that, and that he is someone that lived after. If he's coming after, then he essentially would be showing us what the original version of him did. So that to me just seems like kind of a step removed unnecessarily. Like the Night's King, it said the night was his to rule. He was the king of the night. Like, he was a man by day, but the night was his to rule. This sounds like somebody who powered up during the night, and not like a werewolf, but during the long night. And then also he ruled for 13 years, supposedly. That sounds about the right time for the long night.
Yeah. No, it's definitely possible. The other way that it could work is like that the long night type events, like how I talked about, like these magical systems have magical consequences that are like a natural fallout that repeat over history. So what if like the destruction of a magical system always leads to a long night as the new system takes root, essentially. I think that's kind of potentially like if you look at a societal system as a tree, it takes root. When the old one dies, you have the long night, and then the new one's built. It's kind of like, I've also compared it to like, because this is Bran's religion that he's raised with. This is our main character's religion. It's like losing your religion. You have a long night where you're just in a void of like, whoa, everything that used to like govern my world thinking is just now gone. And then slowly but surely a new system grows to fill the void. And I kind of think that the societal system going through a long night would work that way. So if the Night's King was trying to destroy the old way system, it would make sense that a new long night type thing would be building up, and maybe we didn't get a full long night with him because it was only 13 years, not generations. But had he like gone through with the destruction of the system, it may have triggered a long night event, which is kind of why I think a lot of the things that the Targaryens are doing by, say, stopping the first night, having their dragons there, which maybe the dragons will end up being important in taking down the wall, just like we saw in the show. A lot of the things that Bloodraven's doing, they're building up towards the destruction of this system, and they may, in fact, be building up towards the Long Night, because the only way that you can ever get out of this system and get into a new, better one that doesn't require all the baby sacrifice is by going through a Long Night at a time when humanity's able to survive it. So if the Night's King was building up towards a destruction and rebirth of the system, a long night type thing happening around him could make sense. That's kind of how I thought it through in my head.
So here's how far we have gone at different times as far as like, but what if the bad guy is really the good guy? So maybe Bloodstone Emperor crashed the comet into the moon because the comet would have destroyed the Earth, if not. And so he'd use the moon as a shield, because there is moon shield symbolism in a few places. And so Weirwood shield and moon, so think of the Kingsguard shield, their table's a shield.
Yeah.
So maybe Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, the myth could be about somebody taking a moon and being like, no, don't kill me, kill my moon first. Take him, not me.
That could work. That could work. That'd be interesting. Yeah, that's the thing with, like, we need these last two books to, like, shake up, like, the people get so obsessed with thinking we know the way things are going to go, and it's like, you got to remember, George could go out of left field with something like that, where, like, in the next book, he introduces this random magical fact about the moon that we hadn't heard before that shakes up everything that we, had ever thought. He did that with Weirwoods, like, 6 times in the last book. He just introduced something new that just flips everything. And you're like, wait a minute, they can do that? Wait a minute, every bird has a child of the forest living in them? What?
Oh, don't even get me started on that. It's impossible. What, do the birds live longer than the children? What does that mean? Is there a hive mind supported by the birds? That's the only answer.
I think that's the one, but
because the direwolves have a direwolf net too. Yeah, that's it. Is raven net. So glad we agree.
All animals are magical. George R.R. Martin.
Oh God. Okay, so I just had a thought in my brain, and it just So both of us are the kind of people that get the occasional comment like, why don't you guys just write your own book? You're making stuff up, blah, blah, blah. And this is the thing about theory crafting, is like, it is part imagination. What we are trying to imagine are plausible things that George could be implying. We're looking at the foreshadowing, both the plot and the symbolism and the themes and stuff, and saying, well, it could make sense if it turned out to be like this. And if it did turn out to be like this, you could look at these signs and say, okay, yeah, it's pointing this way. But it could also make sense if this thing was the truth. And these two things could be different things that both seem plausible. And so that is exactly the exercise that I wanted to do today. And I feel like we're doing. So this is fun.
Yeah. Now, and I was going to say, like, blanket, like, disclaimer for this whole thing. Like, at best, like, 50-50 shot of anything that, like, any theory about how the future books are going to go, if you can get it to be in a 50-50 shot, that's a good theory. Like, there's 1,000 different ways the books could go. If a theory is 50-50, I consider it a good theory. That leaves room for there to be multiple pretty good theories on any given topic. So.
Or it might be that the actual truth turns out to remind us of certain theories in parts and be like, oh, I was sparking up the right tree and I didn't imagine exactly the right thing, but, I got close. My light ran out. So, I was just gonna say this. Let's go ahead and tackle the super chat. Madman with a pen. If the Weirwoods and shade trees are yin and yang, is one or the other a corrupted version of the other? And if not, so how? So everything is corrupt to me. Corruption. I'm like that mad prophet in King's Landing. The Weirwoods are bleeding and have been altered. They used to be green hand leaves instead of red. I feel good about that because it's in the drawing.
Yep.
And the shade trees are definitely, no, I shouldn't say definitely. I think they're messed up, but they could just be a cousin species that looks like that. Now, they seem pretty corrupt. The name Shade of the Evening reminds us of the Long Night. Euron is corrupt. The Warlocks are corrupt. They look sickly and stuff. They taste nasty and oily and viscous, and Victorian didn't like it. So, not good quality wine at all. I think, here's what I think. I think the shade trees, first and foremost, are doing symbolic work to tell us about the others and the Weirwood net. Okay? The inner sanctum of the House of the Undying is very obviously the heart of winter, surrounded by cold blue shadows. Yep. Dany burns it with dragon fire. We could read that chapter and learn a lot about the others, essentially. So,
agreed. Yeah.
I definitely think that the shade trees are showing us a symbolism of the bifurcated Weirwood net, and that's why they're the opposite flip-flopped colors, kind of the Weirwoods. It's like, oh, the others, they're tied to magic trees too, but they're twisted, they're darkened, they're haunted, if you will. But the literal trees, like I said, they could be a cousin species. Greyways Tim and I both think that they were originally Weirwoods in Asshai, and that it is the meteor that fell at Stygia that poisoned the whole peninsula and turned those trees into Shade of the Evening trees. And I even think that Grey King made his arc out of Weirwood. And I do have a Grey King Naga's Bones video coming. More Ironborn, that's right. I think that Grey King made his arc out of Weirwood to salvage some when Asshai was being corrupted, and he sailed that thing to Westeros and then reactivated the magic. So
that'd be cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
And so we'll as far as the shade goes, yes, basically it sounds confusing because all of these ideas are plausible. Like I said, it could be that there's one original green Weirwood tree and they get turned into shade trees in Asshai and red Weirwoods in Westeros for some reason. Go ahead, Michael.
This is something that I was going to have to bring up in this series at some point anyway, so this is a perfect time to bring it up. But I, basically, as you said, I think a way I would say it is physically, I'm not 100% sure on what's going on, how the trees are related. It seems like they are probably related, but I couldn't describe physically how that happens. Thematically, though, I'm much more confident in how they're related. And I think, because like we sort of talked about this in the beginning, the others being a part of the Weirwood system and being essentially granted their immortality by the power of the Weirwood system opens them up to a bunch of interesting interpretations. And it could be that the others themselves want the system to continue and they want their immortality to continue. Or it could be after 10,000 years, these bodies inside the wall may want to die and like the system may be ready to destroy itself. And which one of those things you believe personally, I think you should read the chapter at the House of the Undying to decide, because I think George is mirroring the conflict in the end of the story that Daenerys will deal with the others, with the Undying. They either want to die, they either want Dany to kill them, or they want to suck her vampirically, like they want to suck her energy to sustain their life longer. So if you think that the others want to sustain their life longer, that's probably what the Undying were doing as well. If you think that the others want to die and these bodies that are trapped to the trees may want the trees to die, which is something that I've talked about quite a bit, I think the House of the Undying probably also wanted Dany to die, and like this may be a little bit off topic, but I think we've talked about that a little bit before, did we not?
No, and what you're referring to is the line where when the Undying are burning, they lift their hands on high and call out in tongues, long dead, and they're like dancing. Yeah. And it almost looks like a religious ecstasy language.
Exactly. And the fact that they let the dragon in there in the first place. They could have made her keep her dragons outside. I think they tricked Piat Pri into allowing Dany to come in and burn them, because Piat Pri and the Warlocks were probably benefiting more from the Undying as a power source than the Undying themselves by that point. And potentially the Weirwoods and the others are benefiting more from these bodies strapped to them at this point than the bodies themselves. So the bodies strapped to the trees may want the system to die. The trees may want the system to stay alive, which would make the entire conflict the heart tree in conflict with itself, which I think would be cool.
And I would throw this slightly different interpretation at you is, what if the others really are more like trapped, exiled, or imprisoned, meaning their entire existence has been forced upon them against their will? And if it is a scenario like that, then it would make sense that they are longing for release. And fire, of course, is a cleansing agent. So if the others want to be burned ultimately, or want like the Heart of Winter frozen Weirwood tree to get burned, that could be a part of cleansing the Weirwood net so they can go back into the trees. Because if they come from the trees originally, if they're either green men or it's tree spirits, then like the logical thing to do would be to give them their homes back, as I always say. And this fits together with the Bran download. So let's get into Bran. I don't even know why I have this on the screen. It's in here somewhere, but
we're so far off, we'll just skip around the outline as we need it.
It helped me to organize my thoughts. To
it was good. It was good. It was good so that I knew what we were going to talk about. But
so this is one of the moments on the show that like helped me put some things together. Like when Bran was doing what I call the download. He was doing a long thing where he was just receiving tons of visions. He didn't get time to finish, and then he finished later. And then once he finished, it seemed like he had everything in his head. Like if you asked him a question, he's just like, Lyanna had on a blue dress, the Isle of Faces. There were 7 green men watching Rhaegar and Lyanna do it. It was weird. Yes, it was. Actually 8 if you count me. And I'm a boy, so that's weird. So he's got the whole thing in his head. So this got me thinking like, oh, well, if Azor Ahai going into the Weirwood net is a bad thing and a corruption and a violation, well, we got to get him out. And if the others were used to be in there and they need to go back in, this all kind of makes sense. Like, we've got a squatter and we need to get him off the property so the tenants can move back in. So how do we get him off the property? Well, the Weirwood net hive mind of greenseers that has accumulated since the long night, I don't think that's any tree spirits at all. That's just a bunch of greenseers. Okay? And so those guys are the ones that need to get out of the trees so the others can go back in. And when I say greenseers, I'm talking about humans like Bloodraven. So I think that Bran is going to download all of that so that the Weirwood net is empty and the others can go back in. So you like this theory?
I like that theory. I think that is, like I said, like a good theory being 50-50 leaves room for like a couple good theories. And I think that one's like right around like it's like really good theory. We just don't know enough yet to say it's like 100%. You know what I mean? Like it's like that. Everything about that lines up and makes sense and could definitely be the way that George goes, where the point of the others is that they need to go back in. And seeing Bran do the download is definitely important. I think it's either going to be exactly what you said, where like he pulls the human spirits out to get the other spirits back in, or potentially also going off of some stuff you've talked about with like the Winter King, Summer King mythology, he could pull some of that like world tree energy into himself by being wed to the trees. When all the rest of the trees are destroyed and burned, if they need to plant a new world tree, him carrying that download could be part of what allows the world tree spirit to jump then into the new Weirwood tree if they plant a new one.
So,
or a new world tree.
As you and Eldrick and other Elden Ring players have started talking more about world trees and replacing them, this reminds me of the Mayan Mesoamerican mythology about the suns being replaced every so many thousand years. A different god becomes the new sun and stuff. There is also a series of old fantasy books called Shannara by Terry Brooks, Sword of Shannara. And one of my favorite concepts, in which I have read all of when I was young, One of my favorite concepts in there is that the elves have a magic tree. There's a singular magic tree, and it keeps all the demons locked up in this alternate reality called the Forbidding. It's basically hell, but it's a alt version. It's a dark world version of the same landscape that we know from the main story. So they're in this parallel reality, and if there's trouble with the tree, the demons start leaking into reality because the tree is 1,000 years old now and it's dying. And how do we have to refresh the tree? We need a new chosen elf girl to kind of go into the tree and become the tree for another 1,000 years. And the spirit of the tree turns out to be an old elf girl from 1,000 years ago. And so I think this might be something that inspired George, because
that sounds
yes,
very
they made
similar.
it into a TV show, Girl Nettles, and I watched it. I wasn't going to mention that. Thanks for calling me out. Yes, I did watch it. It was like, it wasn't very good. But
I was going to say, this all sounds very similar to how I kind of think the rebirth of the world tree is going to solve the problems of the old ways. And
well, you know where I'm going, so let's go ahead and go there. So basically, the original Nissa is spelled out as having become the Weirwood net when she dies. So my whole theory about Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net and killing Nissa and that being all the same thing is that Nissa is this elf woman with a tie to the Weirwoods. She might just represent the Weirwoods.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's always a possibility. There might not be a person. It might just be the tree. Okay. But I think she's a tree person.
And I tend to agree. Yeah.
Okay. And so by shedding her blood, he goes into the Weirwood net. But he's essentially altering it. He's transforming it. And so there's this scene with Ygritte in the Winterfell Godswood. It's one of Jon's dreams. And he's making love to Ygritte in front of the tree. And he's like, oh, they're watching, you know. And then she dissolves in the pond. She melts and turns into blood and bone. And the pond turns bloody. And blood and bone are the colors of the Weirwood. Ygritte, her name is Ig-Right. Is it a magical rite that you perform on Ig, which is a Weirwood. So she's definitely a Weirwood woman. And she also white-skinned, red, kissed by fire hair, just like the fiery red Weirwood canopy. And so she's becoming the sea in front of Jon. She's becoming literally the green sea, the watery part of the Weirwood net. But she's filling it with her blood. And then the complement to that is Dany when she's out on the green grass Dothraki Sea, which is her Nissa Weirwood Sea. And Jorah says, come autumn, the whole thing turns to a sea of blood. So there's more, but the suggestion is, and this is also like, never mind. I can't think of it. A different fantasy series where it's all a virtual reality based on somebody's brain. And the brain is a person that's in a spaceship. It's weird. But the point is, Nissa becomes a Weirwood net. And the Weirwood net might need a new Nissa. And that person,
I agree,
would be Dany.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Exactly. That is spelled out in so much detail. That's a video that I'm working on, that I've been working on for a long time. That Dany is probably going to be the new spirit that becomes the new age world tree. Like, that's probably the reason we saw Jon stabbing her at the end of season 8. Subscribe to my channel for a future video, like fully going through like all of the logic, but like it's a big project to try and like pin down. But yeah, there's a ton of symbolism with Dany, how she wants to plant trees and watch them grow. How Drogo calls her the moon of his life or whatever. Or he's the sun and stars, she's the moon. The tree and the moon are linked, as we talked about. She wants to plant trees and watch them grow. As you talked about, the idea of there being some sort of spirit that is the original like tree spirit, potentially being a sacrificed person. There needing to be a new world tree potentially built in the end. Yeah, I think in general, without giving away like my entire whole theory here, basically Dany is in line to be a sacrifice.
Well, I was going to say, maybe this is one of the ones we could collaborate on, like we were talking about, because I definitely got some fuel for your fire. And I've been talking about her being a Blackwood. as much as half for a long
Yes.
time, as much as Bloodraven. So this would obviously be where that comes in. And then my biggest find about that is the canopy that she falls into in the House of the Undying Vision, which I've talked about many times. At the end of the vision, she sees the hands of the slaves. She hasn't done this yet. In the next book, she'll free the slaves. But you remember, they all lift their hands up to her and call her Mysa. And so she sees this in the House of the Undying. She sees 10,000 blood-stained hands. I'll get to super chats in a second. 10,000 blood-stained hands lifted, and then says they needed her life, they needed the fire, and she opened herself up and she gave it to him. Then she wakes up and it's actually the Undying. But the 10,000 blood-stained hands, that's a Weirwood canopy. The leaves are always bloody hands, even blood-stained hands, or 1,000 blood-stained hands. It's very tight language. So basically, Dany is in this, she's at the heart of winter, confronting the others, and she sees a Weirwood canopy, and she hears the slaves, which are like the whites. They're the ones that need freedom. And so she gives her life and her fire to this Weirwood canopy. And then as soon as she wakes up, Drogon burns the Undying. So I think it seems like we agree that this is foreshadowing of her going into the Weirwood net, dying sacrificially. This is how she does it. This is how her death specifically saves everything and fixes everything. Like, this is how this works. And so this also, and this is my last point, lines up with the idea of Dany as being a nature goddess. She is draped with endless goddess symbolism from every culture. I haven't even gotten started. Aphrodite, Kali,
Gaia.
Right. And so there's in the House of the Undying, she sees the woman with the dwarves biting and ravaging her. And the woman is Westeros, and those dwarves are the Five Kings. This is the War of the Five Kings tearing apart the land. But when Dany wakes up, the Undying are all over her and biting her, just like that woman. So this is a clue that Dany represents Westeros in some way. She is an embodiment of the Earth Goddess.
Yes, she is, in my opinion, set up to be the Gaia for the next age. Like, I talk a lot about how this is going through a cycle of rebirth. We're going to go into a new age. And yeah, I think you're pretty much right on that. Nissa seems to be symbolized as the spiritual, like, Gaia for this old age. I think Dany's sacrifice and her life force are likely going to be the spiritual Gaia for the new age, therefore allowing her to achieve the thing that she wanted to do. Free a bunch of people from a system that has kept them enslaved for a long time, which is this Weirwood system that we're talking about, and becoming herself the new, like, spirit within this system and planting a tree and watching it grow forever. She gets to do that forever. That's her end build up is towards that.
I like how you tied in that bit about her always trying to plant and water trees. That's
George is doing that because she's going to end up being a tree in the end. Sorry,
well,
Dany.
We should talk. That's pretty far afield, but that's very satisfying, and I'm glad to find someone else who...
Once I finished that video and put it out, that was the one that I told you like a long time ago. I'm like, hey, I got a video that I want to get out before we talk in detail because I know we're gonna get there, and like as soon as we start talking about it, I'm just gonna want to spill out all of the theory. And now we're at that point where I just want to tell the whole theory, but I'm like, nope, I got to do that one on my channel. I have a whole video like planned in bullet points. It's just I need more bullet points and I need to organize them better, and eventually that will come out.
So we're going to flip back to the PayPals here, and there's a couple more topics we're still going to get to. Or the super chats. I do have a PayPal also from Jonathan about the Black Gate, which we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
So that's a good one. Let me go back to the super chats here. This is going very swimmingly. This is fun.
Yeah, it's a good time.
If Bran holds the sword, Dawn, couldn't he interact with the spirit of Nissa, who could then tell him what really happened in all those... Oh, thanks for reminding me about this. Okay, so I don't think... Well, Bran wouldn't need a sword to know what happened. I mean, all the knowledge of what happened is in the Weirwood net, and Nissa might be in the Weirwood net. One of the reasons why I think she's in the Weirwood net is because of the story of Lightbringer. Her strength, Nissa's strength and soul and all that goes into the steel of Lightbringer. But Lightbringer is a multifaceted symbol. It represents the fire of the gods in the Promethean way that you're talking about, whereas man tries to become a god by stealing the fire of the gods or whatever. Lightbringer represents that. The two versions of Lightbringer really are the dragons and the Weirwood net. Those are the two magic powers that are the fire of the gods. And we see everyone that tries to handle them, it's hard. Dany's like, am I the mother of monsters? What happens if I bring the dragons to Westeros? She's worried about all that stuff, right? So Drogon ate little Hosea.
Yep.
So the idea of Nissa going into the sword, well, especially the idea of a white sword, it could just be really talking about her going into the tree. So
yeah. I my take was exactly what you said at the beginning. He doesn't need to hold the sword. He's wed to the trees that are wed to the sword in probably a similar magical way. He can just probably do that now.
But I do think that Dany could have a magical experience with Dawn.
Oh, actually that tracks really well. If someone was going to have a weird magical moment when holding it, Dany could be.
Because it's kind of like a milk glass candle.
Yeah.
One thing. So its true power might be something to do with visions or magic that's not, chopping or swinging.
Right.
And then also, again, you go back to Shannara, the Sword of Shannara, which is the original novel in that series. Its main power is revealing truth, not chopping people. It's kind of a trick. They're all thinking it's going to chop the Warlock Lord. And it's like, no, the Warlock Lord is made of lies. And so the sword draws him into this magical realm where his lies are confronted by the hero, and then he weakens his power. I forget exactly, but that's what it does. So, and at different times, it'll also help the main character confront their own truth that they need to grapple with. So Dawn could be like that. The light that it brings could be truth, magical knowledge. So that's good stuff, Robert. Thank you. Do those handlebars work for pickup lines? He just has to say hello. That's it.
Yeah. I have noticed one of the things I've noticed that's been really funny is I've noticed an uptick of random cashiers, service workers calling me boss. Since I grew the mustache, I never got called boss before I had the mustache, and I've been called boss multiple times by random people who don't work for me. So I'm like, okay,
who does?
That's the main difference. What's that?
That's nothing. Nothing's making Austin Powers jokes about who number 2 works for. Glidus Hill says, theory. The Weirwood trees were corrupted by the creation of the others, by the children of the forest, and maybe the shade trees got corrupted by the Valyrian Empire. Well, it would be the Great Empire of the Dawn, but that's Proto-Valyria. Yeah. So, that's kind of a lot of what we're talking about here. I don't think the children willingly did anything destructive to nature, whether that's the hammer of the waters or creating the others or defiling the trees. I think we're talking about people hijacking the magic of the children and doing those things myself.
It depends. It depends on if, I think they may have done it as a result of the war with the First Men, right? By desperation, when it comes to, destroying nature or surviving, I think they probably were faced with that choice because of actions of the First Men, and then therefore they turned the trees into warriors, which is another quote I have in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The one, it's under they look scary, but I'll just read it here. It's let's see.
Asha Greyjoy.
That's higher up. Yeah, it's under corrupted.
No, you don't. I know that one. She remembered the tales the Wetners used to tell her about how the children of the forest, in their wars against the First Men, turned the trees into others. And I think that is an oversimplification. I think that it was the magic of the children that was used to create the others.
I think it's a simplification of explaining that they strapped greenseers to them and birthed shadow babies with the trees. I think that was turning the trees into warriors. But I do think also the idea that
maybe some children or green men didn't all agree with the other ones and did their own thing. Yeah.
Yes, and that could be the origin of the idea of the others, is those were the ones that eventually, if the pact eventually led to, because it could lead to a situation where the First Men and the humans, or the children and the humans, teamed up against those other children and humans who teamed up to create these ice demons. Everyone else teamed up against them to build a wall and keep them on the other side. That's another plausible way that it could have gone. But I do think, at one point or another, others were created by children based on the line, turn the trees into warriors. I just think that might not be the only time others were created. there's possibilities there.
Juniper Jenny says Long Night is code for different apocalyptic events in history. It's definitely like inspired by, the the year of no sun at 536 AD and things like that for sure, which was a volcanic eruption. I think that was that Tambora, or was that?
I think they're also talking about too. I'm not sure, but I think they're also, yeah, I think they're also talking about how like this is like a cycle that repeats in this world. So like there may have been multiple of these long nights in the past, and I think that is what George is going for, sort of like the Mayan cycle, as you talked about, like how there's just a rebirth of this magical system, and every time, yeah, there's probably a long night that is the transition phase.
It's something that people have always asked me about, and I've just kind of shrugged my shoulders because, like, well, the only one that matters is this one. There could have been previous ones. That's just a backstory. Like it's
flavor.
What happened.
It's flavor for what's
yeah.
It's flavor for this. This story is the one that we're living through. It's just more like, oh, is this a one-time thing, or is this like a part of a cycle that will keep happening? Like, will the new system that they build be with good intentions, and then in 10,000 years, will it be bloody and corrupt and need to be reborn? Probably. Like, that's probably how these things
it does
work.
shape your thinking about the end game a little bit, as far as like, is this a one problem that was caused 10,000 years ago that needs to be solved, or a recurring thing that we've got to refresh or something? Yeah, those are both interesting approaches.
Yeah, because I kind of think that is how systems of power tend to work, is like people set them up with good intentions, and then over time people find ways to corrupt them, and then eventually you have generations and generations later, no one even like remembers exactly what the good things they were set up for. It's just all the corruption, and then you have the system rebirthed. So if we're at the rebirth of this one, it's probably been, being corrupted for a long, long time, and it's just at its point in the cycle.
So we've got a random, what did you think on book? What do you think of book Cregan Stark?
So I am
Since
not
you just look like Benjen and just have opinions on Starks, I guess. I don't.
I'm not the one probably to ask about Fire and Blood book characters, because I was vaguely familiar with them a long time ago. But then when House of the Dragon came out, I didn't like go through and refresh and like read Fire and Blood. I've never read Fire and Blood cover to cover, but like I was aware of a lot of things that happen in it.
You got to read the Septon Moon stuff, man. We still don't know who killed Septon Moon. That's a mystery.
I'll have to figure it out. But
if you could tell me who killed Septon Moon, I'd be appreciative.
All right, I'll take a look at that one. See what I can come up with.
Some of us still remember Septon Moon. So, is Boris turning Squisher Innsmouth style? Who's Boris? Are we talking about a different TV show?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't watch other TV shows very much.
Do they mean? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know who Boris is.
I know Boros Blount, but that's about it. But yeah. So yeah, no. All I was gonna say though, I was finishing up, is just when House of the Dragon came out, I didn't want to like spoil myself on everything that was gonna happen by instantly diving back into Fire and Blood. So like, there's a bunch of like random, like I know like a lot about random characters from Fire and Blood, and then there's some Fire and Blood characters who I don't know that much about. And Cregan is one where it's like, I know of things he did, but not that much. So I don't have.
And I of course have talked about him extensively, which is why the question was directed at you, because I make all the Cregan jokes I can. So something that we haven't gotten into that I want to bring up, since we have talked about so much the Weirwoods being transformed and what they're like now and refreshing them. Let's go back to the beginning and talk about what we can recreate from the original practices. Tony Teflon says he knows who killed Septon Moon. Children of the Forest, I bet. That's his answer for everything. He hates them. No, I'm kidding. I would be curious to see what his theory is. But, Crowfoot's daughter, again, Disputed Lands, to give her credit, she sussed out before the new calendar art that the original Weirwoods probably had leaves like green hands. And as soon as I heard her say it, I was like, duh. Yeah. They have leaves like red hands now, and there's this original figure, the first guy in Westeros called Garth Greenhand, and he makes everything grow, and he plants 3 weirwoods, which how do you plant a weirwood? We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah.
So he's some sort of green man god who sets up, who gives, all the first men houses descend from him. He creates a tree throne for the gardener kings. So it's like, oh, this sounds like the before time. This is a very ancient time that we're talking about, when the first men were in Westeros, first getting there, first arriving, first setting up houses and all that stuff, spreading throughout Westeros. And so she figured out that, well, probably his green hands were reference to green hand leaves. And you can imagine a white tree with green leaves. And then we got the calendar art from Justin Sweet, Rhaegar and Lyanna on the Isle of Faces. There's a white weirwood tree. It's a white tree, I'll say that, with a face, but there's no blood. And the leaves are green. All the leaves are green. Sorry, guys. I need a cough drop. Point is, the art kind of confirms it. This looks like the Isle of Faces. The Isle of Faces makes sense as a preserve of something original. It's warded by magic and the lake and all that. The lake blocks 5G and Wi-Fi, by the way. That's why. Yeah. And so these original trees, the main thing I want to point out, Michael, is that it's nice that they aren't bleeding, because it implies that perhaps the original practices didn't involve blood sacrifice. Right. Or maybe it's only green men who are sacrificed and their blood is green. And that's why. Yeah. But the other thing is that if the face isn't bleeding, then the only other face that we've seen that isn't bleeding is the Nightfort face, the Black Gate. We don't know if it's carved or not. However, it talks, and it's not bloody. And we've never seen any of the carved bloody faces talk, or even move. And so what I think we have here is that the carved faces are copying whatever's down there in the well in the Nightfort. That's the original tree face, because that one talks. That one's alive. That is a tree that can say words. And so when we look at the similarly unbloodied Weirwood faces on the Isle of Faces artwork, that to me says those trees can talk too. And that those are not carved, but those are natural tree faces. And so now we have an original picture. The Godswood has this tree that talks. So of course everyone goes and prays to it, and then God tells you what he wants to tell you. Now, is there a green man behind the tree whispering, or down in the roots? Right. Who knows? But this is what I've got for the original Weirwood things. Essentially, their god, Garth Greenhand, is the Weirwood. It's this Weirwood with green hands that talks. And now it makes sense. This is the fallen state stuff. So like Bran wants to talk to his dad and Theon, and he whispers to Theon. So it's like he's getting it to work almost. But it used to be when you wanted to say something, you could open up and talk. So take that any way you want to.
Yeah, and we get hints at that with Bloodraven talking about how the birds used to be used to communicate magically. Like, you used to warg into the bird and have it carry the message, but nowadays you tie the message to the foot and have the bird fly off, because they've forgotten how to do the magic that the system is set up to do in the first place. But the system is still there in the form of its remains, and the trees are still taking in the blood, but they aren't getting the full use out of it that they were getting when the system was set up. I would say that I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Well, the question is, like, what is going on with that? Like, how is there, in order for a talking tree to exist, like, are the green men tied to them? Does a green man sit down in the throne? The oaken seat being a living tree throne that doesn't sound like it's in a cave, maybe that's the original form.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because that's something I've been talking about a bit recently, is the wind talking and the trees talking, because we saw that in House of the Dragon. The wind said the word traitor right out in front of the Weirwood. Mm-hmm. And some people someone in the comments was like, no, it's just the bad writing. They literally think the wind is on one side or the other. I'm like, no, like, I didn't say this in the comment, but it's like, no, guys, literally that wind is probably a dude who is descended from House Blackwood. The wind is literally on one side in this war, guys. I'm sorry. The wind is a person with a rooting interest in this conflict. But yeah, so the wind talking is like definitely going on right now. And yeah, we definitely see that big tree that can talk. So I'm tempted to say that, like, yeah, you're probably right. The original form was the trees were just fully able to talk. But there's room for a way where the fallen system isn't that the trees are acting differently, it's that people have forgotten. People have forgotten how to listen to the trees. So Theon can listen to the trees for whatever reason. It's possibly because he's in a broken and desperate state where he's willing to believe the voices he's hearing in the wind are actually the gods talking to him. Whereas Ned Stark is like a cynical, like, not mentally broken at the moment enough to believe that he's hearing actual voices. He's like, no, of course these voices aren't my future son talking to me. Like, that's not something Ned Stark is going to believe. But Howland, when he went to the Isle of Faces, it said that one of his powers is that he can talk to trees. And it said that when he was done on the Isle of Faces, he said his goodbye to the Green Men and paddled home. But in the original version that was found at the Cushing Library, George had wrote, he said his goodbyes to the trees and paddled home. So George changed the wording from said his goodbyes to the trees to just said his goodbyes. So, like, that is more implication that even today on the Isle of Faces, you can talk to those trees in some form or another. Whether it's just talking to the trees and you hear the wind, or whether the mouths move and actually talk, I don't know. But
maybe it's like ants. Yeah. They're really slow. So it helps.
That's why
the green
Howland
men.
had to
the green
stay.
Men are like translating.
Yeah. Howland had to stay the whole time because they had to say a whole paragraph, so it took him all winter.
So part of the mythology of Cernunnos being a stag man and being an avatar of nature and the forest itself is that the antlers look like tree branches. Like, you could see my shirt is mixing tree branches and antlers kind of together here. They look the same. That's the point of the symbolism. So a green seer, when he puts on the tree, when he skin changes the tree and wears the tree like a skin, he's becoming a green man. His head has a tree coming out of it. Yeah. And if you look at the Weirwoods, that's what we have. You have a face and then the branches like antlers. So it's kind of like a green man is planted in the ground and turns into a tree. Or
and the black gate face, Bran says, like, hey, wait, this looks like if a person's face was able to live for 1,000 years and never die, that's what they would look like. That's exactly what it might be.
And that's kind of what, like, similar to what you're talking about with the others. It's like, oh, well, there's an original green seer tied to the tree way back when. So we're getting, and then there's the oak tree that the wildlings south of the wall, they carve a face into one of the oaks, and it's like, it looks like it angry, like it wants to rip out its roots from the ground and come running after us. And it's like, that can maybe happen almost. So I think we're going to get some truth of that, obviously, when we see the Isle of Faces. But that's interesting about Howland talking to trees. I wish I had that. By the way, I just recorded RLJ, A Secret Wedding, which is RLJ Part 2 for me. And it's talking a lot about what Rhaegar and Lyanna might have done on the Isle of Faces and all that stuff. And I wish I'd had that line. But that's okay. That just strengthens what I said, so...
Yeah, I have that happen a lot, and it's always it's frustrating to not include it in your original theory, but in a similar way, you feel good when you're like, oh, this was a solid theory, and there was this line that I didn't even know about that makes it even better. Okay, cool. Like, I've had that happen a few times, and it's always nice where you're just like, oh, I just put that out, and now it's even stronger.
So let's talk about planting weirwoods and weirwood seeds.
Yeah.
The weirwood paste is presented to Bran as a paste of weirwood seeds. Now, we are pretty sure that's Jojen's blood or his brain. I think it's his brains in a bowl. So, and I'm going back for the super chats. I am. But they say, so that leads us to, maybe this is tricksy wordplay. What is a weirwood seed? It's a green seer. This makes, going back to planting a green man and turning him into a tree, like maybe to plant a weirwood or create a weirwood, it does require some kind of sacrifice. So maybe not again, fallen state, current fallen state thing. We just have to feed it blood. The original version, maybe it's just one green man that becomes a tree or something like that. So how do you think Garth the Green planted Weirwoods? How do you think Weirwoods are planted on either side, before or after the fall, if you will?
Okay, so before the corruption, I could see them being a more normal type of tree. Like, I'm even open to the idea that, like, Weirwoods are essentially just a tree, a normal tree that has been magically worshipped and then therefore taken on these properties because of all the magic people have, like, over time put into them. So, like, I'm open to the idea that pre-corruption Weirwoods could be planted like normal trees and had a more normal tree life cycle. But yeah, like, the weird thing that stuck out to me is if you go on a search of Ice and Fire and look for Weirwood seeds, the only time in all of the books that they're used is to describe that paste. And so that doesn't really work.
There's
and
no Weirwood seeds. And in your video, you
Yeah.
you were hilarious. You're like, there's no seed pods. There's no acorns. They don't have those little helicopter things. I was like,
Yep. I looked for all of it. I looked for Weirwood cones. I looked for Weirwood helicopters. I looked for all of it. It ain't there. And so I think that, yeah, like, when she says this is a paste of Weirwood seeds, that's like saying, oh yeah, this is Rocky Mountain oysters when you're feeding someone cow testicles. It's like, this is a way to say you're eating something that's disgusting without telling you how disgusting it is. And so she's telling Bran, hey, you're eating a paste of Weirwood seeds, but really she's feeding him a paste of people. I think if you transported me into Westeros and told me my life was on the line, I have to plant a Weirwood, what I would probably try first is chop off a Weirwood branch, like a piece of Weirwood that already exists, plant it in the ground, and sacrifice a person in front of it, watering it with their life force and their blood, and hope for the best. Hope that you plant it somewhere where its roots can connect to the rest of the Weirwood root system. And that's the best I got for how I would plant a Weirwood.
I really liked that video that you did about that. That was a lot of fun. I liked the process that you went through to arrive at that. I was like, yeah, that sounds like it might work. And again, I think that Grey King made his arc out of Weirwood to use it. I think he brought it to Westeros, beached it, flipped it upside down, and watered it with blood, just like Euron Red Hand kills 13 kings and 50 priests inside of Naga's ribs and makes them run red with blood. And I think that Grey King... Oh, leg cramp. Oh, that was vicious. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'll take over in mid-sentence. Yeah, you sacrifice to the giant boat built out of Weirwoods, and you can reactivate the magic within the Weirwoods themselves using the blood sacrifice. And if you want to build a giant seat of power for your new Grey King Empire that is going to last for a long, long time, doing some blood sacrifice to some magic Weirwoods at the heart of that power is probably a good idea.
And of course, the Weirwood ship is this huge symbol, right? The Weirwoods are vessels for the greenseers to sail the Green Sea and all that. And so, yeah, it's like Grey King has the symbolism of a greenseer in terms of mythology and the idea that, like, oh, he's got a crown of Naga's fangs. But if Naga's a Weirwood, he's got a Weirwood crown. He's sitting in a Weirwood throne inside of these Weirwood ribs. It's like, what's the point if he's not actually using the magic?
Right.
But how do you use the magic? So I just had stared at it forever. Like, was there once really a Weirwood throne? Or, like, how does it work? It's like, I think he is reactivating cut Weirwood with blood magic, and that is a possible thing you can do. Blood Raven's arrows. The idea that Weirwood arrows have some magic property means that cut Weirwood has a magical property to it, or can.
Yep, and I was already, like, leaning towards this idea, but House of the Dragon Season 2 has been very kind to a lot of my theories, and the one of Weirwoods being able to grow roots from, like, cuttings watered with blood, everything we saw at Harrenhal lines up really well with that, because there was specifically Weirwood beams in those walls. The stones were said to be mortared with blood, and now we got Weirwood roots bursting out of all the walls everywhere, so it just lines up really well.
Yeah, I loved that. I thought that made a lot of sense, the way they did the Harrenhal. I had a lot of fun talking over that with you. So,
yeah, it was good.
Now that the chat has turned all to Cleo emojis, let us go back to the super chats.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the great questions today. It's a fun discussion. In Jasper Fjord's last Dragon Slayer series, the dragons kind of guide the world's magic by manipulating people into performing a big magic event, which resets magic levels everywhere. That's interesting, because I did just put out a video recently called Dreams Come From Dragons, where I was, we just found out this sort of scratched out bit from the World of Ice and Fire that Dany's the Dreamer had her dream of the Doom the night after she claimed Balerion, therefore maybe the dreams are coming from the dragons. I put that together with Dany's dream of Drogon that comes before he hatches, which seems like it's coming from the egg. And so the dragons could be orchestrating all of this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I think, it's either the dragons or the Weirwoods. I think it's more likely the Weirwoods that are orchestrating the reset of the magical system. But as we talked about, like, if all of these are conduits through the moon, like, it really makes the most sense to me that there just is, like, magic, and these things, like, are different conduits for magic. So, like, the dragons and the Weirwoods and the dreams are all part of a similar magical system. They're just arriving through different vessels. So it may be the entire magical system itself is, like, resetting itself through manipulating people via prophecy and dreams.
This makes sense to me. Yeah, this makes sense to me. And some people are just like, oh, the greenseers are sending all the dragon dreams. I kind of hate that, though. It's like, no, they're separate. There's a reason why these things are separate. Like, there could be a common tie between them all, but
I could see George going in the direction of A Dream for Spring is the book where Bran has to go back and send all of the dreams that we've seen setting up the timeline. Like, Bran, that's what he was doing in the show when he, like, flashes back into his head and then just, like, comes back and smiles at the Night King, because he's like, okay, I've seen the whole chess game play out. Now I'm going to go back in the timeline and send everyone the dreams that are required so that in 2 seconds you're about to die. And then I'm going to smile at you until it happens.
So I do like that theory in that it is a coherent theory and it is interesting. Yeah. I don't
You hope it's not the way he goes.
Oh,
right?
I don't hope or not hope. I think whatever George does will be great. And it's interesting. No, if George goes with something like that, it's going to be even cooler than any of the theories about it are, and they're interesting. Yeah. So
I know some people hate the time stuff, but I'm like, it's just there. I think kind of.
I think that what we'll see.
I don't know how to play out.
Sorry. I think we'll see a very limited amount of timeline tampering, and the tiny bit that's done will be very bad. So it won't be like, oh, we've just got to go do a bunch of time surgery. I don't think so. But that is an interesting and, like I said, a coherent theory that could make sense. So,
and the way that I kind of view it, I think really does fit really well in the whole system, or the whole, like, stream that we're doing, which is this Weirwood system. Because I do think the Weirwood system allows for a very specific type of time manipulation, whereas the Weirwoods stand outside of time and can send dreams. So you can go back and send dreams without really manipulating the timeline because the dream was always there.
I agree with that.
So it allows for time travel in a subtle little way.
And that's the kind of thing that we'll see. That does square to me. That, like, that's the extent of it. It's like sending weird dreams and thoughts to people. Boros Blount. No, it's Maren Trant. Maren Trant is the one that has the dead fish eyes and stuff. I don't know about Boros Blount. Maren Trant is very suspect. If Weirwoods are analogous to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn's Witchwoods, described dark like iron, Dany will sit the Iron Throne in the end. We know she's not going to sit the Iron Throne in the end.
Only question is, will the Iron Throne even be there in the end?
But Dany's going
to be on it, I don't think.
But to your point, though, Dany's going to sit the Weirwood throne.
She will be the Weirwood throne in a way.
Yes.
Like, spiritually, she is Gaia for the next age, and the throne will be her in her spiritual form in some way, probably.
And there's I haven't read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, so I've only heard Gray talk about it, Gray area.
Yeah.
And there's something where there's like a meteor sword, or like they get stuck into the tree, and the tree then has iron instead of sap, or some. It's like so it turns into an iron tree of some kind. I'm not sure exactly River Mist. I haven't read it. But there's definitely extensive parallels. We have meteor swords, corruption of magic trees. So we're cooking with the same ingredients.
Yeah.
Here.
Yep.
So yeah,
the
Danny would
corruption.
be.
Oh, I was just gonna say the corruption of the trees coming from like space makes a lot of sense too, even if it's not like directly a meteor. If the consciousness that's in the Weirwoods is hinted to be alien on some level by the end of the story, I wouldn't be surprised. That seems very George-ish to do.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because this is the Lovecraftian layer to it, and he's always harmonizing these things. But yeah, the Azor Ahai invades the Weirwood net, but he does that after he's powered up with the meteor, the black meteor, because the Bloodstone Emperor Azor Ahai, same dude. So he's using the meteor magic to do all this stuff. And it may be more connected, if like what me and Michael were talking about with the moon, connected to the seasons and the whole planet. Yeah. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think I pretty much said it. So I was wondering if the creation of the others during the dragon glass sacrifice,
Probably in the show. The dragon glass like sacrifice with the dragon glass knife.
Right. May also be the origin of the three-eyed raven. The trees went into his body while he went into the net. Oh, I see what you're saying. So, okay. So this is an interesting magical principle that you've brought up. One of the first versions of the others come from the Weirwood trees idea that I had was the idea that there might be a way for trees to skin change people and to get, like, those tree spirits want to get out of their trees and get into people, that maybe they can do that. And what you're saying is like, well, again, the thing about the show magic stuff is very simplified and very off the rails. So you have to be real careful drawing inferences from stuff like the way the Night King was made. There is no Night King in the books that's equivalent to the guy on the show. Yeah,
it's a different character.
Yeah, so... Oh, sorry, Kaiju Cleo. So you can't be there, girl. Sorry. You're Kaijuing. Origin of the Three-Eyed Raven.
I would say it's important to make the distinction with this question because, like, the Three-Eyed Raven is talked about, like, weirdly, I think, because of how the show went. Like, is the... and I do this, too, so this is, like, me calling myself out partially, but, like, the Three-Eyed Raven may not be the whole, like, Weirwood hive mind consciousness itself. The Three-Eyed Raven could be Bloodraven. It probably is Bloodraven. Like, if we had to say what's most likely, like, that's the most straightforward, is that it's Bloodraven. It could be a future Bran, if that's a thing that he can do with time travel. It could be Bran the Builder, who would be a three-eyed, enlightened Bran who's been living down there for 10,000 years. But people talk about the three-eyed crow like it's like the collective hive mind of the Weirwood itself, because the show kind of talked about it that way. Like Bran, when he called himself the Three-Eyed Raven now, he was that collective hive mind. Whereas like in the books, it's not really that way. So when he's saying the creation of the Three-Eyed Raven, I think he's talking about like, was that event the thing that created the hive mind that's inside the Weirwoods? Or like whatever spirit some people think like took over Bran's body, which I don't really think is the way that exactly worked, but it's close enough where I see why people say that. But so to answer that super chat question, in my opinion, like I don't think that the creation of the others necessarily created like the Weirwood hive mind. If anything, it probably like melded that guy with it. But I don't know that it created the hive mind. And the Three-Eyed Raven itself, if it like, I think that being the way they handled the Three-Eyed Raven in the late seasons of the show was a show thing. I don't necessarily think Bran's going to become the Three-Eyed Raven in the way he did in the show. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and it reminds me of what I was talking about with the Night's Watch, where I'm saying the creation of the Night's Watch and the others is linked. The watch may be made out of the bodies, and the others made out of the spirits. There is some of that stuff going on where like bifurcation and multiple things are being created at once. Kind of this whole stream is addressing that super chat. So let me see here. Oh no, I want the supers. I'm convinced the children are Weirwood seeds now. Well, yeah, I tend to think, like I said, I was talking about planting a green man, but it would be some sort of,
It makes sense.
yeah, it could be a child of the forest green seer.
One of the things that you brought up in your video about how the original Weirwoods were green that I really liked was the Norse mythology about how people survived Ragnarok by crawling into a tree and then they crawled out of the tree. Well, we were talking about before, if there have been multiple long nights and this is a cycle that happens multiple times, it makes sense that in one of the last long night type events, some of these little people who worship the trees crawled into the trees and then were born out into the new age by crawling out of the trees. And that would be the children of the forest. Like it's a straightforward, very George R. R. Martin name for them, if that is in fact how they survived the last Ragnarok type thing.
Right. So I talked about, I was saying, yeah, maybe the original green men are, sitting on tree thrones. I was like, or maybe the trees just like open up and the guy just steps inside his,
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, that could be a way that the children of the forest are literally children of the trees. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Weirwood paste is Jojen's heart in conflict. No, it's his brain in conflict. Thank you, Ross Temby, and thanks for the good questions earlier. Oh, the second Ender's Game book. Yeah, Speaker for the Dead. Yeah, there's extensive correlations. Some people in the chat have already been talking about it. People on an alien planet get sacrificed willingly to grow as a tree that fertilizes the alien females. Yeah, it's a very strange biology that they come up with. And there's a trippy chapter written from the point of view of one of these tiny little grub worms crawling out of the tree womb and onto the bark. It's very creative, and it's probably the best of that series. Yeah, Speaker for the Dead. That's a very fun book, very imaginative. What's with the sex connection between Children of the Forest and Weirwoods? I only see female Children of the Forest and only male others. Oh, the White Walkers.
Yeah.
I like the idea that children sacrifice their useless men to piss off the humans. Sorry, I just got to absorb that for a second.
Yeah.
I think it could be that the green men are the males. They are the males, and that the children are the females. They could be related species. We don't know that all the children are female either.
Right.
That's.
I was gonna say I don't think that's been confirmed unless I missed something, but like it's like the dwarf. It's like the dwarf women with their beards. You can't tell. So.
Yeah, it's a bunch of twigs and leaves and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, all of them just look like they have the old lady hair. It's just made out of twigs and leaves. They've just got that short little.
I'm pretty sure the green men are tall, so that would be very extreme sexual dimorphism. Yeah. I tend to think they're different things, but related.
I think the heart of the question here might be like, is there a situation where like the females are the children of the forest and they turned all of their men into others? And I don't think it's interesting to think about, but I don't think that's the most likely as
it's a coherent idea though. It's a coherent idea for sure.
Well enough. It's like I said, like it may not be 50-50 likelihood, but it's like, 20%, which is a solid enough, like.
Oh, you want to go through and rate all these things on percentages, Michael? We can start some fights if you want to do that.
I mean, that's how I kind of I just spitball my percentages, but like
I do too.
I'll read a line and it'll go from 20% to 30% because something else backs it up, and then I read something else and it'll drop to 25, and that's how I kind of try to not get too attached to any theory.
Yeah, like stuff like Sandor is the gravedigger. Like that's basically 99%.
Yeah, 90%. Yeah.
I'd go as high as 90 on like an actual theory. Like I think moon meteor. I'm not anywhere near that sure. I'd say I'm more like 66% confident that we'll have moon meteors in the winds of winter that will cause the new long night. Maybe on a good day, like 80%. I feel good about it, but.
That's how I feel about there being Weirwoods in the wall. It's like I've like that one. I'm like, okay, I'm above 50% on it. On a good day, yeah, like 80%. The idea of them physically like actually creating the wall wherever I'm feeling that day about there being Weirwoods in the wall, that's maybe 10% lower that the Weirwoods are actually the thing that pump the water into the wall. And then it, as we get more built upon theory after theory building on each other, it like drops the percentage likelihood a little bit each time. But it's like.
Yeah, you're like, man, I'm really trying to thread a needle here at this point.
Yeah, yes. That's the problem with my whole Danny video is just because it's like, I have an idea. I know how I think this is going to go. But if I would have explained this to you all a year ago without like 10 videos explaining how I see the series, you would all look at me like I'm insane. So I've been building up like the framework for how I view the system of the Weirwoods so that I can explain how you fix it, because then I won't sound completely crazy. So.
Cool. Well, safe space. You're a safe space. And the later it gets into the live stream, the crazier the ideas that you can let loose.
Exactly.
So we're 2.5 hours. We probably are getting near the end here. Is going back to planting green men, the description of the Black Gate, as if somebody could live for 1,000 years and never die. That's exactly what Grey King did. He lived for 1,000 years, and he turned gray and old, but didn't die. So, and he's sitting on this Weirwood throne. So I think what's going on here is this is talking about Grey King petrifying into a Weirwood statue, and this goes back to the lowest levels of the crypts and all that stuff. So there's one line that I caught that I read to you, Michael, that you hadn't caught either, and I only saw it the other day, and it's really good. Let's see, where is it here? This is
right at the bottom there. You were right on it, I think.
Yeah, I am on it. I'm just trying to figure out who's talking. If it's it's Jojen. Those you call the children of the forest have eyes as golden as the sun, but once in a while one is born amongst them with eyes as red as blood or green as the moss on a tree in the heart of the forest. By these signs do the gods mark those they have chosen to receive the gift. Oh, green and red eyes. So green, like the previous color of the Weirwoods, green hand leaves, and red, like their current. Okay, interesting. The chosen ones are not robust, and their quick years upon the earth are few, for every song must have its balance, but once inside the wood they linger long indeed. 1,000 eyes, 100 skins, wisdom deep as the roots of ancient trees, greenseers. So, it's the word quick that I hadn't caught before, and I only remembered this quote as greenseers, those with the gifts don't live long, but then they're in the trees and they last a long time. That makes it sound like Bloodraven is an exception, and that most greenseers don't hold on for that long.
They die, and then they're in the trees forever after they die.
But no, quick years. Quick years means not tied up to the roots. So Bloodraven is now in the trees, but he's lingering long. And they say that exact phrase, he's lingered long for you, Bran. And so getting to those singers that Bran sees, the children of the forest greenseers on the thrones in Bloodraven's cave, that's what we see. Those are greenseers who have lingered long in the wood.
They're still lingering long.
But they're still lingering. They're not totally in there. And so this means, and this is what we were talking about this last night. I just couldn't believe I'd never thought of this. It's like, those are active greenseers. They are doing stuff. What are they doing, Michael? Are they flying birds around? Are they piloting the wolves? Who are those?
I think they're flying birds around, or they may be piloting the others. If and this is what we talked about a little bit too, is if those bodies that are ancient, thousands of years old, potentially still alive, were ever used to make shadow babies and cast shadows, well, because those bodies have their life force sustained, those shadows are probably sustained and still out there. And if you're trapped, stuck, like we talked about a brain in a spaceship before, right? This is kind of the thing that made me recognize like what the greenseers are doing. Because, like, how would you set up a system if your body was going to be strapped to a system that, like, fills you with fluids to keep your body alive forever? Well, you wouldn't want that unless your consciousness could go somewhere else and do things. So, you have to have your consciousness jumping around in birds or have some agent out there in the world. And that's why I think these greenseers and the Weirwoods themselves birth the others. So, yeah, I don't know that specifically those bodies that Bran sees down in the cave are the bodies of the others or the bodies that cast the others, but bodies very similar to those probably are. So, yeah, it's the lingering long greenseers that are kind of the key to a lot of this. And you're exactly right with this line, like, their quick years are few. I took it the same way for a long time, and it's just like, no, their life is very, very long. Potentially immortal if the Weirwoods are never disturbed.
Yeah, Jojen isn't seen. The last scene that we see is like at a certain point, Girl Nettles, and then later Bran eats the paste. And the last scene before that is the one where Mira is worried about Jojen and runs away in tears. And then Bran eats the paste, and we haven't seen Jojen since then. So, yeah. Check out Weirwood Paste as people. I explained it all in there. He scrambled up the tree.
Yeah.
So, Uh, so okay, if it would be really funny if those singers in Bloodraven's cave were the others. And it's like, yeah, we could go over and cut their throats anytime, but there's a reason why we don't. And wouldn't
Right.
that be interesting? And this is what I talk
Right.
about babysitting the bad situation. You We need to put them back into the Weirwood trees. If we just kill them, we're sort of killing the last tree spirits. Like those are the tree spirits that are holding on and they've got to be put back.
What's so great about it, Dave, is if the system as a whole, this magical system, is the thing that controls the seasons, then that means the thing that was corrupted is required to exist for the world to move on and continue. So yeah, that
Right.
was sort of the sin of the thing that they did. That's why it was so bad, is this was something that the world needs, that you corrupted for selfish reasons, that now needs to be fixed. Thousands of years later, it's still causing problems. So yeah, I think that could be the reason that they need to rebirth the tree spirit into a new form, is because otherwise the seasons don't start up again and you get what? An endless winter, which is exactly what the long night is. So
And they also talk about a summer. The Roloris want a summer without end. Maybe that's what happens if you kill all the others. It's like maybe it would
yeah,
flip, and you'd get
yeah,
there'd be
maybe there's
no
a way to get
winter.
that result as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, yep, yep.
So
But
I'm
yeah,
laughing because I've said, "Oh, Bran and Bloodraven and the children, they're babysitting a bad situation." They could be literally babysitting the others'
yeah,
bodies.
yeah, yeah. Because they need to destruct and restore the situation in a very specific way, or the world is destroyed and the seasons never return again, and you have long night forever.
It's like that one broken bong. I haven't thrown it away. I'm gonna get it fixed one day.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly,
gonna. If I
exactly.
throw
You
it
just
away, I
need to
can't
find
fix it.
the right prophesied glass blower needs to be born 10 years from now, and then you have to raise him specially in a cave so that he can fix it properly, and then eventually,
Back to work.
yeah,
It's all leading up to
exactly.
something. Okay, cool. Very funny. All right. So then let's go back. There's a couple of super chats, and I think there's maybe one other thing we want to hit.
Yeah.
Back to the Nightfort, I guess, a little bit. We've gotten most of
Well,
the Nightfort, but you do have some.
we can always also just put another vaguely related lore summit that I'm sure we'll touch on like 10 of the same topics. Like we could do a whole Nightfort lore summit and you know go down a few more tangents, I'm sure.
Yes, we could talk about the Nightfort all day. We could talk a little more about Winterfell also.
Yeah,
Just want to.
anything you want. I'm just saying, like in general, we'll come back and hit a bunch of these topics for the viewers who probably want us to touch on all of them.
Just want. It's yeah. I can't do a stream without talking about the Weirwood net. It comes up every day. So there was a cold hands question earlier too. Just want to
Oh,
pony up for the message I sent on IG about my name being from a movie and stuff. Thanks for the content. Narbarian Rage.
I don't know. I don't know the movie reference.
Yeah, I don't either. I'll have to check my message requests. You gotta remember to do that. IG for some reason puts a lot of them in requests, and you gotta click on that to see them. Boris's transformation resonates with the fly for me some reason. I think he's growing gills. I don't know what you're talking about, Ross. Boris Blount growing gills? I need to do a reread. Are you telling me there's two squishers on the Kingsguard? Marin Trent
That's
and
your
Boris.
area of expertise, so I got nothing to add on squishers on the Kingsguard. That's like that's all you. That's all you.
I think he's just getting more stout because he's made the Tommen's taster and he's eating lots of rich food. That's all I remember. But maybe there's something else there. I don't know. That's how the children built the wall, planting.
Yes, yeah. If I don't know when that was sent, but yes, I would
Recently.
agree that the wall was planted, not built. Probably.
Yeah.
It makes more sense as someone who lives in a place that usually gets enough snow to build snow forts. I don't care how many Night's Watchmen you have, you're not cutting blocks of ice from a lake to maintain that wall that's that long and that large and like hauling them all the way up there. Like you could have all of the Night's Watch working all day, every day on just doing that, and you still would have it melting faster than you're building that wall. So, and also the lakes run out of water. Like a lake is only so deep. If the wall is 300 feet high, even if your lake is 50 feet deep, right? You need 6 of that lake to build an equivalent area of wall. Like,
So my only My only drawback with the trees creating the ice of the walls, I don't know that George is thinking about it in that practical of
He
a
may
level.
not be. I
Yeah.
wouldn't think he was if it weren't for the fact that the Black Gate drips water out of it and the well's walls are damp for no reason. Because as I joked to you off stream, like I pointed out how weird it is that at the top of this well that's like huge, the water is way, way, way down lower. The wells are all damp, which is weird unless that well itself is potentially a tree that's pumping water through itself. And then at that point, yeah, it would make sense if it's leaking water everywhere that it would be damp. And someone pointed out, or someone said in one of my comments, oh, of course it's damp. It's a well. Why wouldn't it be wet?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, your toilet is wet, but if the walls are wet, you missed. Like, there's water at the bottom of the toilet. That doesn't mean the seat should be wet. If the seat is wet, you have a problem. If the top of your well is wet, something is wrong. The water at the bottom of the well makes sense.
You're right. Now that could just be George again not thinking about it all the way through, because you could be like, oh, inside the well, the walls are wet.
No, I fully agree that is an entirely, like, as I said, like 60-40, one way or the other.
Yeah, you could be right.
Yeah.
So Michael thinks that well is the inside of a tree.
Yes, I do. So, and I have that, the reason I think I have that quote in the outline here somewhere. Yes. Right under the Nightfort, a glow came from the wood like milk and no, it's right above that. A turn or two later, Sam stopped suddenly. He was a quarter of the way around the well from Bran and Hodor, and 6 feet further down, yet Bran could barely see him. He could see the door, though. So the Black Gate is directly in the wall of this long, upright cylinder. And the face of a weirwood tree is normally in the side of a long, upright cylinder, which is the trunk. So if you hollowed out the trunk and the well is the inside of that hollowed out trunk, you would eventually go far enough down the trunk where you would find the face, and then you go out the face and you're outside of the tree. You come in the face, you're inside a long cylinder. Well, the only other weirwood faces we see, if you would go inside or out of them, you would be going in and out of the trunk. So
it's a reversible face. It has features on the inside and the outside. Both sides.
And on the top, breaking out from near the well, there is a slantwise weirwood that's described as slantwise and skinnier than any other weirwood Bran has ever seen. A tree that is slantwise and skinnier than any other trunk is a branch. You just don't see the rest of the thing. So if the well shaft itself is the trunk, the face is exactly where it should be, the branch is exactly where it should be, and it's all wet everywhere, so it makes sense that it's a trunk pumping water. And so that's that whole idea.
So this is interesting, and someone asked this earlier, which is like, when you go through the Black Gate face, you're into some sort of tunnel, obviously. So when you come out the other side of the tunnel, is it a weirwood butt? Is it another face? Like, what is it? But maybe they're leaving the weirwood when they walk through that face.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think
You're
that's what it is.
You're kind of selling me on this, to be honest.
Yeah, dude, and it's like it's right in the side of that well because he can see the door, even though, like, you know what I mean? It's not like Sam gets to a point where they walk down a tunnel and then
I thought there was a tunnel, and you're right, there's not.
I did too, until I reread it. Eventually, I realized, like, wait a minute, no, it's right in the side, because if it wasn't, he wouldn't be able to see it when Sam is further down the well. It's right in the wall of this big cylinder. The cylinder is described as covered in niter, and niter is a white buildup. So essentially, this cylinder is described as white. And niter is also a buildup that is apparently present in tree sap. So, yeah, you could have... Yeah. Imagine how, like, metal that is if essentially... Oh, and here's the other cool thing that I just put together recently, too. We talked a little bit about how the Night King would have been removed from the history books. One of the things that you would do if he was using this giant weirwood organism to do some of his dark magic is you would cover up the giant weirwood organism. I think the Black Gate, the Night's Watch doesn't know about the Black Gate. Nobody does. Mance, if he would have known about it, he would have taken all the wildlings through it. So no one north of the wall knows about it. The Night's Watch doesn't seem to know about it.
Only Cold Hands.
And I think the reason... Yes. And I think the reason for that is because Bloodraven, possibly because he was linked to the Weirwoods enough to know about it, was the one who uncovered it. I think all of the gates through the through the wall were covered with ice or stone when the castle were abandoned. I think the well itself was, they built those bricks and walled off the black gate and turned the tree into a well instead of the magic world tree well that it was. They built the normal stone inside of it, walled off the black gate to hide everything that was happening. And it was only recently uncovered by Bloodraven. And that's probably why nobody knows about the Black Gate. And that's probably how it, was secret so long.
Well, so this is partly the speculation that when Alysanne had the Nightfort shut down, that she did so for magical reasons. So maybe she got wind of it. Maybe that she just had a dream. There's multiple. She could have decided to shut it down without knowing about the gate. But if you really are entertaining this theory, it makes the most sense that like Alysanne became fully aware that this was some sort of way to make others or something like that.
Well, either that or I think they were aware of that back in the time of the Night's King. And I think part of the old ways was probably important that there was this blood sacrifice there continuing. And I think, like we talk about how the Targaryens are guided by some sort of prophecy that's leading them towards the Song of Ice and Fire, towards Dany on some level, right? So people always ask, well, why didn't they man the wall more? Why didn't they like prepare the Night's Watch better? I think part of what they need to do might be to like end the first night and weaken the magic of the wall to bring about this long night, and therefore like see humanity through this rebirthing process. So like she may have been just doing it because it was, stopping like this terrible treatment of women, but on a magical level she may have been shown things that led her to stopping it for reasons that in the end benefit the Weirwood system, but use her character so that she's acting unknowingly. I think that's how a lot of prophecy works here. Like, it just plays on who you are as a person and shows you what it needs to show you to get you to do the things that the trees want you to do in the end. So I think Alysanne probably was manipulated that way.
There you go. Well, I have a video about that called Alysanne at the Wall if you want to get my longer take on it. I do think it's a very important moment there. So I'm going to convert Girl Nettles to Jojen paste theory, right? She is a holdout. She's a skeptic. Okay. So I'm going to convert her right now. You go, Mira Reed bent down beside her brother. He was settled in the bole of an oak, eyes closed, shivering violently. What little of his face could be seen beneath his hood and scarf was as colorless as the surrounding snow, but breath still puffed faintly from his nostrils when he exhaled. Mira had been carrying him all day. Food and fire will set him right, Bran tried to tell himself, though he wasn't sure it would. Okay, so let's review. He was settled in the bole of an oak. That means the crotch of a tree, basically. Yeah. But Jojen paste is served in a Weirwood bowl. So Jojen is settling in a wooden bowl like porridge settles when you pour it. Okay? Then it says shivering violently. So again, this is quivering gelatin shivering here. What little of his face could be seen beneath his hood and scarf was as colorless as the surrounding snow. The Weirwood paste is white and compared to snow. And it says Mira had been carrying him all day. Food. Mira had been carrying him all day. Food and fire will set him right. No. Yeah. Get rid of the period. Mira had been carrying him all day. Food. Jojen is food. Okay. Then we have, that's my favorite Jojen paste, but we're going to do the scrambled.
Here. I was just going to say, if you want to do this, if you give me like 2 minutes, I'll be right back while you're pitching your Jojen paste thing. I'll be right back.
Do your thing there. We're going to make a believer out of Girl Nettles. Scrambled Jojen. I thought that's what pulls it up. See, where is it? Yes. A Clash of King Bran 4, this one. So this is when the wolf is menacing Jojen and Mira in the Godswood. Okay. And she's telling Jojen, climb up the tree. There's no need. Today is not the day I die. Do it, she screamed, and her brother scrambled up the trunk of the weirwood, using the face for his handholds. Okay, Jojen ends up scrambled in a weirwood bowl with faces. And when Bran holds it, you hold it by the wooden faces. So Jojen is scrambled up in the trunk of a weirwood. He's scrambled up in the bowl of a weirwood. So, I don't know what to tell you. The direwolves closed. Mira abandoned spear and net, jumped up, grabbed the branch. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Is there any else thing here? No, that's it. Oh, and then the other foreshadowing for Jojen Paste is the series of... That was the best kaiju, Cleo. You got the eye there. They eat... They eat acorn paste the whole way up to the wall. I'm just going to keep talking. They eat acorn paste the whole way up to the wall. And Bran's like, oh, I don't like it. And acorns are seeds. They're tree seeds. Okay? So when he eats a paste of Weirwoods, we look back on him eating the acorn. Okay, that's enough, girl. Nobody's listening to me at all. Come here. Nobody. Not a single person. So they eat acorn paste over and over. This is a leading up to the Weirwood paste. And what do they cook the acorn paste in? Mira's helmet, which is a Cranogmen helmet. Cranogmen helmets are where you put Cranogmen heads. And so they're making seed soup in the helmet. Because later, Bran eats Jojen paste, which are Weirwood seeds, in a wooden bowl with faces on it. So... I rest my case, Bill Nettles.
Have I told you my gross addition to the Jojen paste theory?
No. Why are you holding
So there's
back?
there's two bodily fluids that George has established as having magical properties in this universe, David. Do you know what those two are?
No.
Blood has magical properties, obviously. And then the other one is what Stannis needs to give Melisandre to make a shadow baby.
Right.
And this paste is red and white, David. And if you were going to call it a paste of seeds, that would also possibly be apt for what it might partially be. I'm not saying I like that theory. People have accused me of only going towards theories that I want the books to go towards. This is a theory I don't like. But it is well set up by the text.
The chat is picking it up.
I affectionately, can I say Jizzjen paste?
If you must.
Because that's what I do affectionately somewhat refer to it as the Jizzjen paste theory.
It would be Jojen's paste.
That works as well, yes. Yes. But...
No, the most horrible thing about this is not Bran consuming it. Is what did they do to Jojen in the whole way there?
Yes. To get it, yeah. So
maybe Jojen's last moments were quite joyful, actually.
Yeah, it's something that I don't like. It's death by snoo snoo. Is that what Futurama calls it? That's basically the end of Jojen's life. He's just like tied up in a cave.
I think it's brains. I just want to go on the record. Okay. I think it's brains, but
yeah, no, that's the thing is it's like I don't know exactly how I feel about this theory, but ever since I put that together, I'm like, oh no, it really does track pretty well that both of those magical fluids have power.
We're not talking about cheese. Look for Alec.
Yeah. And I'm also sitting here, I'm wondering what weird part of my brain is it where it's like, oh, I was fine with it when he was just eating Jojen's brain, but now that it's that, I'm like grossed out more. I'm like, wait a minute now.
Wait, that's not as gross. No, eating brains is worse.
Right. Oh, it's much worse, but it's like, it almost feels grosser when it's the mix of the two, but it's like, well, that's not the worst part of this. Why do I feel like it's worse?
I just want to know, how did they express Jojen? That's the horrible part. Little clawed hands.
Yeah.
Tough. Anyway.
It's a weird. These books get dark sometimes.
Don't get me started on Jojen paste sometimes.
Yeah.
I want my $15 back, Dave. It's too late. Too late. I think I did get one. Yeah. He gets gray and pallid as well as squishier. Well, I'll have to reread it. I've never picked up on it, the Boros Blount thing. Like I said, the Mare and Trant one is real obvious. The wall has a massive Weirwood hedgerow. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
That could
Basically,
be.
yep.
Oh, I didn't think about that. So the hedges of the hedge knights sleep under hedges. So that's like sleeping under trees. He's been using that whole thing. Dunk is like a tree. That's one of his main symbolisms, and he's got the gallows knight, Odin sigil, and all that. So, yeah, the idea of the wall being like a hedge. I have to think about that.
Yeah, it's
what we're saying.
All of A Song of Ice and Fire is an elaborate time traveling ripoff of Over the Hedge, that animated movie about the raccoon that steals chips from people. I don't know if you ever watched Over the Hedge or if that was a thing that I just saw because I was a kid at the right time. But Over the Hedge, quality movie.
There you go. All right, so let's see. Is there anything that we have not covered? We didn't talk about the Night's Watch too much.
Yeah. We danced around most of it. There's some stuff that maybe we didn't cover in detail.
I don't know if you've heard my theory about greenseer kings, but basically what I am speculating is that Varamir Sixskins is showing us a very crappy version of something that would have been much more common in ancient day. Because, of course, the people with the power of green seeing and skin changing would end up being lords and kings quite often. And also, like, if you think about rival tribes, and this is where I guess in the First Night, it's an awful tradition called the First Night. If every tribe or clan is led by a greenseer king or a warg king, you want to have one too. And so this is where this idea that the first night that the Lord gets to sleep with everyone first, this is the original lords would have been skin changers and greenseers, and the point of all this is to have more chances of producing somebody with the gift. Originally, the theory is just like, because the greenseer, like Varamir, wants a son that can carry on his magic. But if you think about it from the clan perspective, Cleo, then it's like everybody actually would have an interest in it, because if you don't have a greenseer king to lead you, you're going to get your ass whooped by one of the other ones that do. So I do think there were originally the first kings and rulers of the first men would have been wargs and greenseers, which lines up with most of the Reach mythology also.
And that lines up really well with how I think it works. Because, I think it's exactly what you said, and I can even, I think, add on to it. It's the selfish perspective of the king themselves, obviously. If you can sleep with every woman in the country, you do that. That, from a selfish perspective, if I had the option of, do you want to be able to sleep with every woman or sleep with none of them? I'd be like, I'd prefer to be able to sleep with whoever. So, like, it makes sense, like, why you would selfishly want to do that. Then, the clan, as you said, like, you want powerful greenseers, but I also, like, looked at it from the perspective of exactly what I talked about at the beginning, how this magical system has, like, wormed its way into the social fabric of the world. And one of the things that it does is it presents this power that allows you to get everyone else to follow you. So if you give yourself, or your ancestors give themselves over to the Weirwoods, you get these warging abilities or these greenseer abilities. You can then subjugate the people around you the way we see Varamir doing. He is getting that power from the Weirwoods. He's using the power to subjugate people. And then those greenseer kings and those warg kings would then, in turn, force the people to worship the Weirwoods. So the Weirwoods grant the power, the people use the power to force the people to worship the Weirwoods, to give the Weirwoods the power, to grant the power to the people, and the whole system feeds in on itself, and then, over time, like you said, the society wants it for selfish short-term reasons, because you don't want to be taken over by the king next door who has more wolves and more wargs and whatever, but all of it really, in the end, grows the power of the trees and intertwines the worship and the power of the trees with every aspect of how your society's power is controlled. And so all of the things that the people do trying to get these warg kings in their society all benefit the trees in the end. So yeah, just all manipulated by the Weirwood system, as well as one of the things I think George understands well is that people act on their own incentive structures. So he's structured this giant Weirwood system to manipulate the incentive structures of the people of Westeros to incentivize them to continue to worship the Weirwoods.
So, what would you say all the magic that's being given to the Weirwoods? What are they? All the blood. What are they doing with that blood?
I would say the most likely right now, if I had to guess, is that it's to power the bodies that are attached to the trees, and that in ancient times there was this group of very powerful people who said, we want to be immortal, and the cost of that was building this system. And maybe at the beginning, the system wasn't as terrible as it is now, but as the system grew and as you have more bodies to sustain and then more trees, maybe, who knows, but 10,000 years after these people are there, their bodies are still alive, whether they're happy about it or not. But I think that's what the system was set up to maintain, is their bodies, and all the blood kind of goes to powering them. And the Ward of the Wall is part of that for the reasons we talked about, with the others being kept away as it's like the nuclear bomb hanging over your head. If you don't do the right thing, the bomb drops.
Well, so yeah, it's like a parallel. The others are taking babies to perpetuate their own existence. And the greenseers are doing the same things. Like the oldest greenseers, like their bodies are being, the ones in Bloodraven's cave, are being sustained by all this blood.
And I think the others, if my theory of the others being cast from the greenseers is correct, that's essentially the same entity. When you say the greenseers are doing it and the others are doing it, they're both the same thing, taking the babies. It's all the Weirwood system we're talking about, potentially.
Well, I said,
if the others are, I was just gonna say, if the others are cast from the Weirwood system and the greenseers are linked to the Weirwood system, it's all the way I look at it is just kind of, it's all the Weirwood system acting through different agents.
Well, so this is where I get into the bifurcation thing, and I came upon this idea a long time, and it really has held up. The symbolism of the Veil of Tears is critical. It ties into the Veil of Arryn with Alyssa's tears, which is a frozen waterfall. The wall is like a frozen stream, and it cries, it weeps when it melts. So same symbol. This is more of the moon symbolism of the wall too. Was Alyssa is a Night's Queen figure and a name even. And so basically, Cleo disrupted my train of thought. What were we just talking about? Alyssa's tears.
The bifurcation of the
bifurcation. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the Veil of Tears. It's a veil. It's a curtain, and it separates, and we see the green lands below and the cold dead lands above. And the other part of it is like, the green sea metaphor. The greenseers are swimming in a green sea. Well, the others have the frozen pond. Their voices are like the cracking of ice on a winter lake. It ties to Dante and Lucifer being trapped in a frozen lake. And then people, when they die cold deaths like Varamir or Jon, the shock is like plunging through the icy lake. Yeah. The Weirwood is like a fist punching up from the icy lake. And I see you got that quote too. So the ice lake is the other's version of the green sea, but it's frozen. And then you go to the shade trees. The shade trees, they're different than the Weirwoods. They are inverted. So it's like, that's their version of the Weirwood net. It is inverted. It's been frozen. And then also the others are tied to cut and dead Weirwood. So the Kingsguard symbolize the others. They have the Weirwood shield. Vale of Arryn, Ice Temple. What do they have? Dead Weirwood thrones. That's maybe one of the best clues that the others are greenseers, is because the Eyrie is an ice temple, other language everywhere, a Night's Queen sitting on the Weirwood throne, but it's a dead Weirwood throne. So basically, and also we have the trees that are half dead. There's a couple. There's one at Old Town and one at the House Blackwood, half dead tree. So I think there's a lot of clues that there's this bifurcation. And so that's why I like the idea that it's similar but parallel. So like the others take babies north of the wall, that powers them. Those sacrifices go to them. Whereas the sacrifices south of the wall, which are obviously diminishing, would feed the old gods. That's how I would see it.
So, yeah, I would say going at what you said about how there's all this buildup of the bifurcation between the two. Because one of the things that we talked about is, do the bodies strapped up to the Weirwoods want to die, or do they want to keep living? Do they want to like end the system and reform it, or return to way more blood sacrifice to the trees? And I think one of the most interesting answers to that is that some of them want to die, and others want to maintain themselves. So, like, some of the bodies, and maybe the bodies that cast the others originally, want to maintain themselves, whereas other bodies may want to die. So, like, you get the split within the Weirwood system itself could be a split literally between, like, half of this hive mind wants to end it all, and half of this hive mind wants desperately to keep going no matter what the cost, and that hive mind is fighting it out. And it's the human heart or the heart tree in conflict with itself.
Took the joke right off my tongue, Michael. You did. You really did. And I do think
I've made that one before, yeah. Because it's like the heart of society is all within these trees. He's doing that on many levels. The humans make up the heart trees. The heart trees are in conflict with themselves. It's human society as a whole in conflict with itself, but also the human heart. He's doing that thing on a magical, metaphorical level.
And Heart of Winter definitely has a heart tree. And that's the point of the blue shadow heart in the inner sanctum of the Undying. Yes, exactly. So.
Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think we've rinsed it out here. It's a rinse out.
Yeah.
We have pretty much killed it here.
Yeah, and I think most of the things that like we didn't quite touch on will definitely be like fit into other lore summits as well.
Oh, I had something. Well, I asked you the question, what do you think the blood is doing? And I like the idea that it's feeding the greenseers and stuff. But I do have a slightly different it's a PayPal. Oh no, that's not annoying at all. I appreciate those. Thank you, Sword of the Evening. I'll check it out 1 second. There always being a Stark in Winterfell is something that I think might tie to this. So, again, there's a bunch of prison and trap symbolism associated with the Weirwoods. It's a trap.
Yeah.
And so they might be imprisoning the others on their side of this bifurcated Weirwood net, just as the wall, theoretically, traps the others on the side and does trap the wildlings. So, it could be that all this blood given to the heart trees, and remember, Ned washes his bloody sword off in the pond. So even though he's not doing Weirwood sacrifices, his tradition of cleansing his sword in the pond is still built off of that and maintains offering of the blood, which Bran can drink. So, the blood could be powering the wards. Those heart trees could be the things that keep, like the seals to the Dark One's prison. That's what I was trying to say from Wheel of Time. Yeah. It could be a similar idea. The Weirwoods are the seals to keeping the others penned up, and if they're not offered enough blood, those bonds are weakening, and that's why they're moving about and they're ready to invade.
I would say those two answers we just put out are like 1A and 1B. Like those are the two things that are most well set up. It's up to you which one you think is more well set up, but it's definitely one of
they both make sense.
Right. That's kind of where I come down on that. There was one question that someone was asking that it wasn't a super chat, but I saw it, that I feel like is a good thing to bring up before we end. Are the Weirwoods evil? And this is something that I talked about in a video, I think literally called Are the Weirwoods Good or Evil? But basically, I view the way George is using the Weirwoods as like they're just society. So it's like a societal buildup, right? Like if people go into the Weirwood trees when they die, that would mean that the hive mind is literally made up of all of the people who have ever lived. And that's sort of what societal norms are. Like all of the societal norms that we have as a culture come from the way that people in the past thought things should be done. And they build up into this sort of like metaphysical
puppet
system
strings that we dance on.
Yes, and so like society in a metaphysical sense is built up of all of the past people who have ever lived. And if you have a society and a culture that has been made up of people who have been generally worse people, you may have a culture and a society that you're raised in that has harsher norms. Maybe they allow your boss to sleep with your wife on your wedding night just because, maybe that's the way that society works. And so you have a society that isn't, it's not that the Weirwoods are necessarily good or evil, it's that they're a reflection of humanity and all of the people who have ever lived, and there is good and bad in all people. And so the Weirwood tree system, as a metaphor for a societal system, is the same way. It's not necessarily good or evil, it's just power, and that power is used for good and evil things, and that calcifies into a system. And eventually, every once in a while, you need society to throw off all the shackles of the way things used to be done and build a new system. And I think that's how the Weirwoods are. So they're not good or evil, they are power, and
that's well
the
said.
ways that power is used.
And I love that we have finally arrived at we live in a society.
We do, yes. We live in a Weirwood tree. We live in a big Weirwood society.
No man is an island. Even the Isle of Faces is not an island. Still plugged in, still connected. So that's awesome. And then Jonathan Flowers, we kind of addressed this, but a PayPal asks about the Black Gate. Is there a face on the other side facing outward? So we talked about that. Is the gate, if the gate's a Weirwood face, does that mean the face is inside as well? I mention all of this because it's almost like the gate, therefore the wall, is more about preventing people from going north rather than preventing people from going south. Love the channel, my first contribution. And that's from Sword of the Evening. So the Black Gate, we didn't talk about the fact that it accepts the original oaths of the Night's Watch as a pass card. So what do you think? Why? And what's the origin of? Let's go ahead and talk about the Nightfort a little bit. Like, how did it get to be that way?
There's a couple different ways I could see for the reason the Black Gate accepts the Night's Watch oath. One is that it was essentially magically programmed that way when the wall was built, and they built the Nightfort, and it still just remembers, and that's just what's happening, right? The other one could be that it was reprogrammed at some point when Bloodraven uncovered it, and for whatever reason, he chose to do that, potentially because he knew that he would need... I don't know. Like, I just leave it open to the slight possibility that Bloodraven set up the magic in some new way when he uncovered it. Or possibly, like we, I think, talked a little bit about, how, like, maybe with the original form of the talking trees, the tree mouth would talk, but the green seer would be down in the roots somewhere. It's possible that whoever was tied up to the original tree at the Nightfort is still there somewhere, and he's choosing to ask that and open his mouth. And maybe it's not just like actually that's the password, it's just that's the test that the person down below there is choosing to use for whatever reason. And it could be the Weirwoods told them to. It could be that, like, you know what I mean? Like, they could have some sort of foresight to know, like, hey, the person I'm supposed to let through is someone who's going to answer this question. I don't know. So in terms of why it accepts that oath, I think probably most likely is that that's how it was programmed in the beginning, because they built the wall that way, and that, you know, that they just wanted it to be a secret gate that only the Night's Watch could use, so they magically made sure that it would only open to the Night's Watch oath said by a member of the Night's Watch who swore in front of a Weirwood. I would say that's probably the most likely, and that just makes sense from, like, a magical defensive mechanism for your wall. Like, if it was used by the Night's Watch originally, which it probably was before the Night's King, like, I would bet the Black Gate was used by the Night's Watch pre-Night King. The Night King started doing evil things at the Nightfort, and then they sealed all of it off with stone to hide everything he was doing, and that's when the Black Gate was forgotten. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, there's a few things to it.
Yeah.
I like the point about seeming like it's preventing people from going north, because this is one of the ideas about the wall, is that it's actually meant to keep humans out of the other's territory, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Or meant to keep people away from the others so that no one can give them babies or something. So that could be inherent in this idea, is that, like, only the Night's Watch can go north of the wall. And we see the others herding the wildlings toward the wall, essentially
Yeah.
in the current plot. So there could be something to that.
Yeah.
The main thing I'm sure of about the Nightfort, the gate code thing is curious. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the main thing I know about it is that since Weirwoods are eternal, and since that thing is so big, and we know all the castles of the First Men are built around heart trees, the first thing that I concluded is that this is not the oldest castle on the wall, but rather predates the wall and was a castle built around the Weirwood tree first that dictated the location of the wall. And that leads me to the idea that there was a green man watch at the Nightfort. And I think it's no accident that Cold Hands shows up there riding an elk, and then Bran and Sam talk about the green men, at the Nightfort. Like, that's a thing. So I did a whole stream called The Green Men of the Nightfort. That's 3 hours of that, so you can check that out. But basically, some of it is timeline heresy. If I'm right that the Hammer of the Waters is a moon meteor event that happened during the time of the Long Night, then the pact between the humans and the children, where the First Men adopted the religion of the children, worshipping the Weirwoods, that would have happened during the Long Night. And that would have been the same pact that created the Night's Watch and created this teamwork between the children and the First Men that we see reflected in that first Night's Watch riding out to win the War for the Dawn, with the last hero receiving the help of the children. So, if that is all, basically, if the hammer is a long night event, it says that pact also created the Sacred Order of the Green Men. And so that means we have this Order of Green Men being created during the Long Night. Well, we also have the Night's Watch created during the Long Night. And the Night's Watch swear their oaths to Weirwoods, and many of them are skin changers even now. And I think probably originally they all would have been, because that's how you resurrect people effectively. It's with spirit animals and stuff. So I really think there is something to this idea that there was a Green Man watch at the Nightfort. And your theory about greenseers being tied to Weirwoods to make the others basically says that too. Like, there needs to be sacrificed greenseers that become others at the Nightfort. And so I'm just saying that's Azor Ahai got there, and he basically took a Green Man watch and Nissa, and he killed them and used them for stuff, kind of.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things about, like, I think what we're driving at here with the Nightfort being predating the wall is it might all be because that tree there that is so giant, potentially compared to, if that well shaft is a Weirwood tree, and if the thing sticking out so far up above the Black Gate is a branch, that makes it bigger than any other Weirwood tree we've seen, and potentially like a world tree type situation. So, like, if there's a giant world tree Weirwood that was there, that's the perfect thing to be a hinge of the world, like you talk about, and that would explain why the Nightfort would have been built there, predating the wall, and why the wall would be built in the location it is, and why you could, if the wall is a line of Weirwoods, why you could potentially maybe grow them, like starting from that one in the middle point, and then grow from there to sea, like sea to sea, and connecting that in the middle, and then you just, it all logically works really well if there was just the world tree was there, and that's why the Nightfort happened there.
And that's why the others were able to be created there. Yeah, that all fits to me. I think the Nightfort is very unique and special, basically.
Yeah. So. And I think one thing I don't know if we talked about on stream or if we've even talked about it all, but how cool will it be if Melisandre has a POV chapter at the Nightfort? Because she's probably the most magically educated person we have, and George has her just primed to go look at the Nightfort and be able to understand it in ways that nobody else, like no other POV character ever could.
Yeah,
she
she's
could
into
look
it.
She could look at some random thing, and where Sam would have to have George like clumsily be like, oh, hey, look at this. This is like that thing I read about in that book that one time. Melisandre can just be in her head. She'd just be like, oh, this is this. I know because I remember it from my time in Ashai. And the reader will be able to learn so much like cool information if Melisandre ever gets a POV there.
I love that you brought that up, because I live for Melisandre talking, like explaining the wall to the Northerners. Like, it's just awesome. Just, you know nothing. You know nothing.
Yeah, it's great.
It's like, well, Melisandre, you don't even know that you can make fire whites, and you need to get on it. So figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff, Michael. This has been a power stream. This has been everything that I had hoped it would be. I think this is a good place to stop. And you've got what coming up in the near future?
So I took a week off this last weekend, but I'm going to be trying to get back at it. I hope to have a video out next Saturday. One of the ones I'm working on involves a old Nan-based theory that I think is pretty cool that people will really like. And then I got a couple more videos, like kind of maybe talking about House of the Dragon Season 2. I might just try put it into like one sort of video. Finishing up, a few of the last thoughts that I haven't really talked about with that, but mostly just complaining about there not being 2 more episodes. So I don't know if I need to make a whole video about that or if I'll wait until after George's blog post and then cover both together, because I'm like, I've got my criticisms. I'm sure George will have some of his own, so I might just
I'd wait till he makes that blog post if I were you, because you might be coming along with the squirt gun after he's already unleashed like a flood.
I know, yeah, that's the thing. So I'm up in the air. I almost had one ready to go for this weekend, but I was sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to spend my Friday night editing a video that I might be able to make a better version of in a week, so I just kind of pushed it off.
Yeah.
And
Plus,
I
think he's probably just going to explain the difficulties of HBO and show running and all that.
I think he's going to be mostly upset at HBO compared to the writers. I think a lot of people who are upset with the writers are like waiting for George to like rip into like Mysaria and Rhaenyra making out, and it's like, guys, that's not the way this is going to go. He's going to talk about how
he's in favor of women making out. He's a little bit of he's kind of a lecherous old man. So
I was going to say, like, that scene, if you don't like queens making out in problematic scenarios with their underlings, you don't like A Song of Ice and Fire. That's straight out of the books, man. that's straight up Mirish Swamp. It's what we get, man. Like,
you're right.
Queen and her underling in a problematic scenario that maybe isn't the greatest, making out.
That was several fingers deep in the swamp. That was. Yes,
yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a perfectly we've been dancing. We managed to very subtly sneak all kinds of filth into the stream without saying anything that YouTube will mind. So this has been well done, sir. There's blood and there's that other thing.
Yeah, we just spell it out if it's controversial, or we
mix
the
chat
it with
picked
a
it up.
character's
The
name.
chat picked it up. Yeah, they got the message. So
yeah.
All right, guys. I appreciate y'all. This was a great stream. This has been a lot of fun, and I will be. Thank you, everyone who's watched The Great Empire of the Dawn Iceberg. And, in the swamp. You end up in the swamp. You have to, you have to crawl on your fingers in the swamp. That's what I was... You can't just, Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if people had never crawled through a swamp before. Something that's maybe not from the bayou.
Your feet get stuck by all the suction. Sometimes
you have to use the fingers. Anyway, so... what was I talking about? Someone interrupt me. Yes, next video is going to be RLJ Part 2. It's coming. So that'll be not this week, but the week after. So I will see you again next Sunday with a stream on something cool. Not sure what. Got a cool list of ideas, and we'll figure out what that's going to be. So pretty much back on the Sunday schedule. I am going to be moving sometime in the next couple months, so I might take a week off somewhere, but I should be here next week. So thank you very much, Michael. Go subscribe to Michael Talks About Stuff if you haven't already. The man has theories, as you can see.
Yep, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Hopefully people who haven't seen my stuff before enjoy it when they go check it out. And good times.
All right. Well, and just remember, Michael's not necessarily saying that everything he thinks is going to happen is something he wants to happen.
No, like, hopefully this is proven. I am willing to follow the textual evidence even when I find the theory terrible and gross.
That's why when I'm explaining about Ghost, I was like, the wolf body's going to die, but the ghost spirit's going to go in Jon. It's okay.
Another theory that I hate with my very core that is entirely textually set up and probably going to happen. Yeah. Yep. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, chat, and I'll see you again soon.